Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Glad to be back with you. We've got an interesting show lined up for you today. We're going to do our best to do justice to the massive, incredible, huge news that broke right after the end of the Sean O'Connell Show on Friday. Of course, Scott Mitchell was filling in for me on Friday. I was out in France doing some PFL duty. We had great fights on Saturday. I guess it would have been Saturday afternoon here in the States. But I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit distracted, honestly, Friday night late and, of course, Saturday morning over in France because the end of an era was foisted upon us in a Friday news dump for the ages. Kyle Whittingham stepping down as head coach of Utah football. I told you all year long I thought that we could expect this at some point. Still, though, jarring when it actually comes down. Even if you're anticipating something and you feel like you're ready for it, you might not actually be ready for it. I hope that Utah football is ready for this next page with Morgan Scalley, who, of course, was announced officially on Saturday as the successor. Always was the plan. I think Morgan's going to do a great job. We're going to get more announcements this week, next week, after the bowl game, I think mostly about, what Utah football looks like under Morgan Scalley. We're going to talk with a bunch of former Kyle Whittingham players on the show today, and we're going to get their thoughts on it. Some of it you've probably seen already on social media, but Kyle Whittingham, 21 seasons, greatest coach in program history. He's done at the University of Utah. I put a poll question out today. What's the best way to honor Kyle Whittingham post-retirement? You could text me 877-353-0700. You want the statue in front of Rice Eccles? Do you want Kyle Whittingham Field at Rice Eccles Stadium? I guess you could say – I should have thrown in the third option. You could say both. That's a little bit too much for Kyle, though. I mean, he's a guy who's probably going to push back on the idea that he deserves the statue. As I was thinking about it over the weekend and trying to figure out how to organize today's show so that it's not just me rambling and talking about, oh, well, remember this time, guys? Hey, what about this time? Hey, remember this game? If you want to try to boil down Kyle Whittingham's effect on Utah football, here's a good way to do it for me. Think of all of your favorite moments as a Utah football fan. Think of every big moment you've seen, every, oh my gosh, there's hair standing up on my arms and on the back of my neck. I've got goosebumps about this. Think of all of them. Unless you're 75 or 80 years old, all of those involve Kyle Whittingham in one way or another. And most of them involve him as the head coach of your football team. The high watermark of Utah football, whether you think it's the undefeated Sugar Bowl season, whether you think it's the Fiesta Bowl season, whether you think it's the first Pac-12 championship in the Rose Bowl against Ohio State or the second Pac-12 championship and the Rose Bowl against Penn State, or whether you think it's something that's a little bit harder to pin down, a little bit less related to wins and losses and trophies. If you think it's, hey, remember that year where they overcame so much and came together after in a 11-month span losing 2 teammates to gun violence, tragic accident in one case, and straight up cold-blooded murder in another. I mean, do you know how difficult it was for this team? I don't know exactly, but having talked with people on every side of it, how difficult it was to focus on the task at hand, to put any kind of emphasis or importance on football, but still keep it in its proper place. And Kyle Whittingham did that. All of the moments that you remember, care about, memorialize, have a poster of, talk to your friends and family about, all of those Utah football moments, Kyle Whittingham helped perpetrate, helped to perpetuate, helped to instigate. This is a guy who is Utah football. And now he's no longer the head football coach. After 21 seasons, and I expected it. I thought the announcement would come at some point. I didn't know the announcement would come on a Friday news dump while I was halfway across the world. Doesn't really make a difference when or how or where, because it's going to, once the reality sets in and you have to think about, all right, well, what is football going to look like without Kyle Whittingham on the sideline? Thank goodness it's Morgan Scalley taking over. Imagine you're in this position and there's not a succession plan, and you don't, I mean, I guess you would have some idea who the likely candidates were to replace Kyle Whittingham, but still, the immediate question becomes in a case like that, well, who's next, who's next, who's next? Because you don't have to answer that question, because you know it's Morgan Scalley, still a worthy conversation and one we're going to have as the week progresses, but because we don't have to wonder, it allows you to enjoy a little bit and to reflect a little bit and to look back a little bit more on what Kyle Whittingham did for this program and his impact on the community that extends out from the program. The wins and the losses and the bowl appearances and the championships are obviously the stuff that gets etched on the career tombstone, right? When you talk about somebody's career, you talk about their accolades. National Coach of the Year, Pac-12 Coach of the Year, Mountain West Conference champion, Pac-12 Conference champion, the bowl streak, the 11-6 record against BYU, all the things like that. That's the stuff that gets written down, as it should, and it's great, and you focus on it for a reason, because those are the things by which we measure success in the coaching realm. The more Hallmark movie and, well, what are we going to talk about when, football doesn't matter to us anymore kind of thing, and what are the guys that are sitting around the campfire with their old college buddies, and what are the guys when they're playing their poker games when they're in their 40s, what are they talking about? Well, you're talking about other things. Yes, you're talking about how fun those bowl games were. You're talking about those wins, but you're talking about some other things. You're talking about the time that you learned this thing, or the hilarious story of when somebody got caught doing something on one of those bowl trips or whatever. And Kyle Whittingham was a central figure for so much of this for now 21 seasons worth of Utah football. And he was an important figure beyond those 21 seasons. I mean, if you take into account that there's 120-ish guys on every roster at Utah football from the time Kyle started, even as an assistant coach, until he retires after 21 years, we're talking there's like 4,000 plus people that have some kind of relationship, some kind of anecdote, some story of how Kyle Whittingham positively, or I guess probably even negatively, impacted their outlook on things. Like, for me, it was a little of both, if I'm being honest. When I was trying to make something of myself on that team and he was taking over as the head coach, I came to the realization real quick that I was not one of Kyle Whittingham's favorite players. I was not one of Kyle Whittingham's guys that he was going to trust. I was not a guy that was going to get any kind of run in that program. And that was a hard realization to have. And I left the program and it wasn't well received. And when I say wasn't well received, I mean, he didn't care, but there were a couple people who were just like, why are you quitting on us? And, then at that time you had to go back in if you wanted to transfer. I don't know how modern day student athletes would handle this, but back in those days, if you were going to transfer, even as a graduate transfer, the NCAA clearinghouse still had some level of influence and power back then. And if you were going to go to a different school, you had to go in and get your coach to sign off on your transfer for the NCAA clearinghouse. So you had to have a face-to-face conversation with that coach. So when I made the decision I was going to go transfer to Weber State, I had to go into Kyle Whittingham's office. It was like the third time that he'd actually bothered to have me in the office. And it was me saying, hey, I know I already quit the team. I'm already gone. But I need you to sign off on this so I can go play at Weber State. That's an awkward conversation to have. And it's not like you're sitting there being like, hugs and kisses. And it was like, oh, you're still not giving up on this, huh? And it was like, oh, well, you should have let me play here. And I'm very grateful that that's not the last, final thing in my time communication, if you want to call it relationship, with Kyle Whittingham, because I would have had a different outlook on his impact on this community and everything. Thankfully, I've spent as much time almost in the media as he's spent coaching. And look, there's a reason why some members of the media were getting really emotional over Kyle Whittingham's departure, because he was really good to us. I feel like whatever respect did not exist when I was a member of the team was restored or was established in the years since, where I got to know him a little bit better, got to talk to him on a different level, got to talk to him about, my other career pursuits, about the fighting thing. And as backward as it is, when you're a former player, even a crappy walk-on, you want coach to respect you. You want his blessing. You want him to be like, oh, proud of you. You know what I mean? And never got that never got anything close to that on the football front. But I feel like maybe got at least one little drop, one little tiny measure of respect for the fact that I went on to some success in combat sports, and he was really cool about that. He would ask me about it every single time I saw him. He saw me fight at least a couple times here, I think, in the state of Utah. And again, you're seeking this approval. I don't know why, but it never goes away when a guy's your coach. And there are 4,000 or more dudes that's the case. And that's impactful. And how he handled those relationships, interactions, ends up helping color how somebody like me perceives everything moving forward. Their bosses, their jobs, their relationships, their spouses. And that's the example. That's when you get these corny cliche things when coaches are talking about, well, I want to develop young men and I care about what kind of person we're developing. That's what they're talking about, right? And there are plenty of coaches. The most recent in headlines is Brian Kelly just being trashed by everyone who's ever been around that program. That's not going to be how it's done with Kyle Whittingham. People are going to talk about the way that Kyle Whittingham affected them, and it's going to be, on balance, mostly very, very heavily positive, because he's an old school guy. He's not even like the most what's the right way to say this? Not the most, I don't want to say personable, because he's a personable guy, but he's not like gregarious. You know what I mean? He's not the guy out there making the jokes and doing the thing and making sure everyone's looking at him all the time. That's not Kyle Whittingham. His behind the scenes sort of just I'm going to try to do things the right way. There's errors along the way, I'm sure. There's some people who don't have that relationship with him, but on balance, Kyle Whittingham and all of those incredible moments that you have as a Utah football fan, all those memories where he was the head coach, or he was at least a position coach, or he was at least a defensive coordinator, those are all the big moments in Utah football. And one of the things that you don't get to measure on any kind of stat sheet is that he developed a program and a culture around Utah football that you and I can be proud of for the most part. That the players in the community, that if you wanted to stay in the good graces of the program, if you wanted to stay on the team for the most part, and obviously there's exceptions to this, but they're rare, you had to be the kind of person that the little kids were asking for gloves and getting autographs. Like, they get to look up to those people for the most part. Nobody's flawless. Nobody's perfect. But the program is something that you could be proud of as a fan. That the off the field, the extracurriculars, the scandals, they were so few and so far between. And I think for the most part were handled pretty correctly, at least to my knowledge. And to me, that matters. I don't know if to you as a fan that matters. To me, that matters because I've been through it with other teams that I've cared about, other teams that I've watched, other teams. And, I use Notre Dame as an example all the time. Notre Dame is one of those teams that, when Brian Kelly was the head coach and there was, all this crazy stuff going on, you had to wonder, is this still the kind of program you can be proud of? You know what I mean? When Urban Meyer went to Florida and then they had all that success, despite all that success, it's not – you learned after the fact that wasn't exactly a Florida team that you get to be proud of. Georgia football is amazing and might win another national championship, but Georgia gets into a lot of trouble. They got problems, a lot of them driving related, which is very strange. So is that something that off the football field the fan base can be proud of? For the most part, Utah football on the field and away from the field is something that you as a fan could be proud of, and that is not something I want to just gloss over because Kyle Whittingham is a huge reason for that. And if it were any other way, who would be getting the blame for it, and probably correctly? It'd be Kyle Whittingham. So if you ended up being a national champion at the University of Utah, but doing it with scumbags and individuals that we found out after the fact were just bad dudes, I'd be sitting here questioning whether or not that was really worth it for the program, for the state, for the community, et cetera. Instead, we get to look at what Utah has been for 21 years and longer, and him being a huge part of it, him being the huge part of it, and saying, yeah, that's something special. That for the most part, you were able to look at this team and know that, yeah, these guys are doing it successfully on the field, but they're also, for the most part, doing it the right way off the field. Hey, that's James, great drop. It's a fantastic song, by the way.
Yeah, that's typically we say something that's not that great about our own athletic careers or whatever, and then we're hey, it's something to be proud of. But in this case, we're totally sincere when I make that drop. It's absolutely true. I think that obviously the winning is the most important thing when it comes to being a coach in sports, but I think that it makes the winning even better. That stuff you talked about, it makes the winning even better, that your head coach cultivated a program that did not get into trouble, and your head coach himself did not get into trouble. You bring up Urban Meyer, not here, thankfully.
Yeah, not here.
But in Florida, and then the end of his run at Ohio State was marred, and obviously the end of his run at Jacksonville, his not even one season at Jacksonville in the NFL, was marred by scandal, right? Personal scandal for him. People that he allowed to be part of the program or he himself just not maintaining the discipline that he preached, right? Especially here. So the fact that Witt wasn't like that is a big deal, I think.
And look, for Utah, sometimes it was to the detriment of the product on the field that they stood on principle, that Kyle Whittingham and his staff stood on principle. There were some times where you would have been better off if you recruited this guy, you offered this guy who was involved with who knows what, and got him to come play for you because he was a good player, but they stayed away from certain guys because of the stuff around them. By the way, all the way up to this year's recruiting class, there's a player who signed with one of your conference mates that you don't want to see a talented player go to, who Utah backed off of and didn't recruit because he was involved with some serious, serious stuff in high school. So sometimes it was to the detriment of the football product, even if you want to say it that way, that they stood on principle. And that's something, again, that I think matters to this community in a way that it probably doesn't matter in every single community.
There's a couple examples, too, of kids who had gotten into trouble before they got to Utah, but Utah in those cases, Kyle Whittingham and his staff in those cases felt, hey, this is still a guy worth taking a chance on. We can help him kind of thing, right?
And look,
and
some
you
of them
saw it happen.
Like Darren Carrington, it worked out very, very well. Tavion Thomas, it worked out well temporarily, and then unfortunately it fell off the rails. But that's also that's a good example of both. That's a guy who needed a little reputation rehab, comes to the University of Utah, does what he's supposed to do, gets on the field, contributes incredibly well to the team, becomes a massive, massive part of an incredible season, and had more eligibility. Unfortunately, was not able to maintain that discipline, was not able to keep things together. And I say it every time, I'll say it again, I think deserves a little bit of grace because he was going through some things in his personal life with the loss of family members and stuff. It's not something I can really relate to, but for me is like, if you do want to give people an out or an excuse, that's something that maybe gets a little bit more understanding from me. In any case, that was a guy that when he did it the program's way, when he did it Kyle Whittingham's way, it was successful for him, for his career, for his life, right? And then when he drifted away from it, the team very easily could have been like, yeah, we'll figure out a way to get his grades up. We'll figure out a way to patch up whatever problems he's got off the field because he's going to give us 20-plus touchdowns if we keep him on the field. But they didn't do it because of the principle of the matter. Because, no, you can't talk to your teammates this way. You can't talk to your coaches this way. You can't be in the community this way. You can't be like this and still be a Ute. We don't become you, you become us. That's a principle that they have lived by, right? And it worked until it didn't. Darren Carrington, guy, again, young person, DUI, very serious offense, big problem. Had to get a fresh start. They gave him one at Utah. They allowed him to change his life, to change his behaviors, to show that he was serious about reform, and ended up being a great player on the football team. Josh Gordon, they offered him the opportunity. It didn't work out because he couldn't do the things that he was being asked to do. He couldn't, and his time in the NFL will show you that if you just looked the other way on some of that business, or you just gave him some extra leniency, found a tutor to do his homework for him, whatever, he could have helped your football team. They didn't do it that way, though, because they don't believe in that. And they actually, for the most part, practice what they preach through these last 21 years.
Yeah, and I just bring that up to say I think it's beyond admirable to still give guys a chance the way he did, and I think it's also a testament to what you're just talking about, how just the character of him and the program that he built, Kyle Whittingham we're talking about, that he stands on these principles and they enforced it, right? And even if it didn't really work out, he and his staff still did everything they could to give these kids the opportunity to change their lives, to let this program, to let him have a good influence on them and their character. And sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But I think even those were good examples of just the good he did for this program and this community.
And those are the high-profile examples. Those are the guys who were good enough football players that we know about it. And then there's a bunch of other ones that never saw the light of day from a media perspective. So, I don't know. That's something that matters. The wins, the accomplishments, the Hall of Fame stuff, of course, is going to be based off of everything that you can count, everything that you can measure. One thing for me that I hope continues in this program that is something long established by Kyle Whittingham, there are special needs adults and young people that work in and around Utah football very, very closely because of Kyle Whittingham. That's like a soft spot for him, and those people have opportunities around Utah football that maybe you wouldn't get elsewhere. I mean, you'd want to talk about having a cool job if you're someone who's intellectually or developmentally disabled, to be around these athletes, to have the athletes treat them and get to know them. That's a Kyle Whittingham thing. That's a tone he established in his program. These are our people. You take care of them. You do right by them. that one matters a lot to me. I have a younger brother who is special needs adult, right? And it's not as easy as you think to get those people into an environment where everyone treats them with respect and treats them the right way. And I've been observing this closely for many, many years now because of my vested interest in it. And that's something that that's an atmosphere that Kyle Whittingham has deliberately established in and around his football program. And I can tell you, it would probably be easier to do it another way. But I admire that about Coach Witt, and I hope it continues. And it's something that not once has he ever asked for the attention, the praise. Like, I asked him about it at a Pac-12 media day one time because, like I said, it matters to me. I said, hey, do you do that on purpose? Or is this just like, Kelly, the equipment manager up there, is that a Kelly thing? And he was like, no, we do it on purpose, obviously. That's something, I got a soft spot for people like that, and I think they're great, and I think they deserve chances and opportunities. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But there are a lot of coaches in the country who don't want the potential inconvenience of it, who don't want the potential like, you never know. Kyle Whittingham and his staff on down has decided that is an important enough thing, an impact that you could make where you give those people a place. It's huge, and it's not something you wanted attention for. And he probably would be bothered that I'm even talking about it. But I'll never stop because that matters to me a lot.
One of the most high-profile examples is our guy Justin, who gets the first question at every press conference. If you've noticed that, and we had a couple of texts like, who's this Justin guy who gets to ask the first question? And has people asking questions for him. Well, he's one of these special needs adults, if I'm not mistaken, OC.
Yeah,
who gets this opportunity.
He's heavily disabled. He's in a chair, mobility chair, and all that kind of stuff. And that's just, that's a tiny little example of it. Yeah. But Kyle Whittingham is done at the University of Utah. We're going to talk with Ari Temkin here in about 3 minutes. We're going to catch up with some former players on the show today. Eric Weddle's going to stop by. Mike Wright's going to stop by. We've got a couple other people lined up that are not fully definitive. Not the only retirement announcement. Beth Lanier, longtime volleyball coach. She's done, and she's going to join us at 1 o'clock. I look forward to that conversation very much with Beth Lanier. She's been a great guest for us already many times on the show. We'll try to keep our thoughts organized. But the massive, massive story that all of you have had a whole weekend to digest, and hopefully we're adding to your thoughts, and I want to have more conversation with all of you, 877-353-0700, at Real OC Sports if you want to weigh in. You building the statue, you're naming it Kyle Whittingham Field at Rice Eccles Stadium, you doing something else, let me know. Ari Temkin next. The show is brought to you today and every day by our friends over at Big Willie's, 1717 South Main. And spoiler alert, they're also going to be sponsoring the hot lunch this week. So we'll talk about the great craft food menu. It is the perfect place for you to go catch any of the holiday sports that are happening. If you need a venue for your holiday party, for your office, for your family, give Big Willie's a call and tell them OC sent you as well. 1717 South Main in Salt Lake City, Utah's sports bar. All right, Temkin, next. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Welcome in Ari Temkin, Big 12 Insider. Big 12 today on TuneIn Radio. Friend of the program, Ari, welcome. How are you?
OC, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm doing all right. We were originally planning last week. We're like, we could kind of transition to some Big 12 hoops talk when we have Ari on continually throughout the basketball season. But not today, because the biggest story in the last, 20 or so years for Utah football unfolded on Friday right after our show went final, and that is, of course, Kyle Whittingham stepping down as the head coach after those 21 years. And I wanted your perspective on it as someone who's followed this program and developed some thoughts on Utah football under Coach Witt.
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of irony that, this season began with Mike Gundy and Kyle Whittingham as the coaches of their respective schools, both the longest tenured coaches in all of college football aside from Kirk Ferentz. And, now we turn the page to 2026 here in a few weeks, and neither are going to be in the same post. Obviously, Gundy's team well underperformed, and in the case of Whittingham, maybe this was the right time for a transition, or maybe his hand was forced a little bit. But, I mean, look, it's not just the 21 years for Witt as the head coach, right? I mean, so you know this. I mean, there's been a Whittingham in charge of the Utah defense since 1979. And when you think about what Fred Whittingham meant to the Utah program and, how much his fingerprints were still over this program, his name's Scally, but he's certainly from the Whittingham tree. But when you think about, a Whittingham, whether it be Fred or Kyle in charge of this defense and in charge of this Utah team for the last 4+ decades, it's pretty insane.
So you just touched on something in there that we didn't really get to in our first segment of the show because it was more about tribute and but the language was conspicuous in the announcement that it's a mutual parting of ways and it's everything except a retirement. Now, Coach Witt is one of those guys who's never going to say never on anything, but the assumption was kind of all year long that if he's done at Utah, he's done. And then, of course, immediately after the announcement and the release from the university with Kyle Whittingham's statement, Pete Thamel, our own Chris Kamrani, people that are close and have good sources were saying, well, not so fast. This is maybe him realizing that the time at Utah is done, but he could potentially seek other opportunities. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and I mean, I read the same thing from multiple publications, and I'm sure you've talked to people close to the program, and it's really interesting, right? I mean, we knew there was a specific date that Kyle had to let them know what his future plans were, and you can't help but wonder if he let them know what his future plans were, and they contradicted what they wanted his future plans to be. And I don't know if Utah, if the brass at Utah expected that this would be it. You can only, I guess, wait with Morgan Scally so long. I mean, we obviously know last year a bunch of high-level programs came and were calling for him to become their defensive coordinator, and you can only turn down overtures for so long. I'm just not a fan generally of the head coach in waiting tag. I get why they did it. I get it, but it just seems to never work. And look, I believe that Morgan Scally could be a very good head coach. But for me, the devil I know beats the devil I don't know. And if you're telling me I can get 5 more years of Kyle Whittingham or 5 years of Morgan Scally, give me 5 more years of Kyle Whittingham.
So that's something that I think will flesh itself out over the next months and weeks. The idea that this Utah football program now turns the page to a new voice, a new face that is – in a lot of ways cut from the same cloth, and like you said, played in the defense and then helped call the defense and has certainly put his own tweaks on it, but it is very much an extension of what Fred Whittingham and then Kyle Whittingham had in place. What do you expect Utah football to look like under a guy who's never been a head coach before but is as red-blooded as they come, having played here and spent his entire coaching career here?
Yeah, I mean, so again, cut from the same Whittingham cloth, not just Kyle, but Fred. I mean, it seems like an extension of that same family for Utah. I mean, look, defensively, this has been Morgan Scally's defense, which again was initially brought to Utah with Fred Whittingham when he was named the defensive coordinator back in 1979. And I'm sure the defense has evolved, has changed schematically. It's been updated. There's, I'm sure, a lot that's new within it, but I think it's still from that same fabric that's been around this program for a long time. And I mean, but we don't know, and you just don't know from a guy becoming a coordinator to becoming a head coach, especially with this on the heels of the news last week with Utah, where they're getting the infusion of private equity money, and did they feel like Morgan Scally, a younger guy, was maybe better positioned than Kyle Whittingham to take advantage of that from an NIL and a transfer portal point of view? Do they maybe feel like overall Scally gave them the best chance, sort of the modern world? And that I would imagine weighed heavily within this decision if it was, in fact, Utah sort of pushing Kyle Whittingham out to make way for Scally. I mean, it's hard. You're hard pressed to find that these two things aren't a coincidence in terms of their timing. But again, I go back to Kyle Whittingham certainly had flaws as a head coach, very few of them outwardly, but certainly they were there. And from a media perspective, I think we all were kind of sick and tired of the way that he handled injury reports. But I mean, at the end of the day, the results are the results. The guy was overwhelmingly consistent in terms of being a consistent winner, consistently taking players that outperformed, their star rating. I mean, Eric Weddle and Jalen Johnson, who had a sick interception yesterday for my Bears. You think about all the guys along the way from a Utah perspective that have become, household NFL names that played under Kyle Whittingham and have amazing things to say about him. So I just go back to this, even if I'm getting 5 more years of Whit, I know what I've got, and yet the unknown of Scally, I'd probably rather take the last 5 years of Whit if I have to make that decision. And that ultimately, as you said, will come out in the wash here, I would imagine, in the next few weeks if we see that Whittingham is interested in other jobs. It'll be a very interesting situation in terms of those that wanted Whit to stay versus those that were okay with this situation. But I go back to the verbiage, the fact that multiple reputable reporters are basically saying this is not a retirement. He doesn't want to stop coaching football, and I get kind of hung up on that, and this being kind of a little bit different than I think we expected it to be. It's a surprise from the standpoint of, I don't know that we expected this to happen today, but it's not a surprise because we figured this was coming. I mean, you had asked me the last few weeks what I thought about it, and obviously with the coach and waiting tag with Scally, we sort of knew that this was coming, but it just feels like this is odd, again, given kind of the verbiage surrounding this, and I'm led to believe now that Kyle Whittingham was sort of forced into this situation as opposed to having it be what he wanted.
Are other jobs going to be interested in him, Ari? Because it's one thing to be 66 years old and long tenured at your current university and say, I could keep riding this train for another couple years. We've got this money coming in. We've got a nice little a pipeline of talent coming in. I like the young players I already have on the roster. Is there a job out there where they're like, yeah, we want that guy who does have a reputation for being difficult sometimes with media and other things, and is not a spring chicken by coaching standards anymore? Are other jobs going to be interested in Kyle Whittingham?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I mean, and then on the other side of that, what job would be interesting to Kyle Whittingham? I don't see Kyle taking a job as a defensive coordinator, right? I mean, I would think that he's graduated from having to go back to something like that. I mean, I would think, if I'm an SEC program that's sort of, at the bottom of the totem pole, I mean, wouldn't you want a guy like Kyle Whittingham that has skin to the wall, that what you're going to get? At the end of the day, there's certainly a ceiling we think on Kyle Whittingham, but that's a really high ceiling given what the floor can be and what we've seen with other coaches. I think he's got a pretty consistent ceiling and floor. And, so I even at 66, I'm looking at this thing thinking, all right, even if I get 5 years of a guy that I know, maybe he takes some lumps, depending on the program he would take over in year one, but I know in a very brief period of time, this is going to be a meat and potatoes program. They're going to play defense. They're going to run the football. They're going to be, just a well-operated, well-oiled machine. You never watched Utah football, and if you did, it was very rare that you were like, man, they were out-coached today. It just didn't happen very much. Sometimes they'd show up, maybe not have the same talent level, but they just, for the most part, never got out-coached. You can never go back and look at coaching as a particular reason for why they lost a game, or if you can count on one hand. And I just think there's so many coaches in college football you could say that about. So it's a great question. And then I would sort of answer that question with another question, which is, okay, what kind of a job would intrigue him? And I don't see him being a defensive coordinator. I don't know that I see him taking over a program, at the Group of Six level. But, again, maybe some of those other programs, whether it's the SEC, whether it's the ACC, it's the Big Ten, maybe even in the Big 12, I don't know that you want a guy that's 66 to your point. So I think there's a lot of factors at play here. But I think you could do a lot worse than Kyle Whittingham as a head coach.
Will Michigan call Kyle Whittingham's agent?
Well, that was my first thought with this was, how would a Michigan fan react? And honestly, who knows who they end up hiring, but it feels like a really good potential hire because, I've heard some of these names that they've been rumoring for the job, and it's like, if I'm Michigan, I need to further myself as much as I possibly can from the Jim Harbaugh era. Whether it was Jim Harbaugh and Connor Stallions, whether it's now the Sherrod Moore situation, all of these guys they keep naming are tied to Jim Harbaugh, and I'm done with that. I need somebody like Kyle Whittingham, quite frankly. And, again, even if you're probably not going to win the press conference because he's 66, he's a guy that has had a lot of success, but has he had enough of success that would get Michigan fans, riled up? But go back to the meat and potato stuff. I kind of want to know what I'm going to expect from my coach if I'm Michigan right now, because they've been under some weird circumstances and situations that make you wonder who's really running the show there, and are they credible enough to hire the right type of coach? Because, again, they've just been a disaster from a PR standpoint going back before Sherrod Moore and obviously with Connor Stallions and Jim Harbaugh and the fallout from all that. So, I know what I'm going to get from Kyle Whittingham. I know the ceiling. I know the floor. I think you could do a lot worse if you're Michigan. And that was, the first thing I thought with this situation was, did Michigan come calling to want Morgan Scalley to interview for the job? Did his agents call Kyle Whittingham? Or was there something involved that sort of Kyle was like, all right, yeah, Morgan can take over. I'm going to look for some other opportunities. But I just feel like at this point in time, Michigan needs somebody like Kyle Whittingham. They need somebody that can come in and really, really right the ship and get them on stable footing a little bit.
Well, I can tell you that this last 90 seconds of conversation got a lot of people really mad here in Salt Lake City because when I found out about Kyle Whittingham, I tweeted something to the same effect. If you're Michigan and trying to squash scandal, there's no better phone call to make.
Right.
And every Ute fan was just heated about it. I'm wishing it. He already said he's done at Utah. You can't build a wall around him now especially if it was not a fully voluntary situation, which we're all trying to figure out. Anyway, we'll see how that plays out, just like everything else. Did the Heisman Trophy ceremony go the way you thought it was going to?
It did, and I really wanted to see – I guess the only thing that didn't go the way I wanted to see it was I wanted to see Fernando Mendoza punch Diego Pavia in the face, just square right in the face. The guy is obnoxious for a 35-year-old well-traveled quarterback, however old he is. Just stop complaining. He probably shouldn't have been there anyways. Jacob Rodriguez, this is the guy that I hope that he takes out his frustration on not getting to the Heisman on Fernando Mendoza in the semifinal game because – it was just bizarre, his behavior, Diego Pavia. Calling out the voters. I'm not one to really back the media in situations like this. I think a lot of times the voters can look foolish. But, nobody looked more foolish than Diego Pavia on Heisman night when, he threw a fit like anybody expected him to win the Heisman. The only person who expected Diego Pavia to win the Heisman was Diego Pavia. And quite frankly, I don't even think he should have been there. I don't think Love should have been there. I think Rodriguez should have been there, and certainly Mendoza as well. So, Mendoza was the clear winner. It's pretty amazing in 2025 what Indiana football is doing. It's unbelievable that a basketball program that is the losingest program in the history of college football now is the number one seed heading into the dance, won their first Big Ten championship since 1945, and now is a Heisman Trophy winner. It's wild.
Yeah, it really is insane, and a testament to how, your past in college football in this new era does not have to determine your future in college football. And that extends, I'm sure, to all the other sports too. But it's especially poignant given what we're seeing this year with Indiana. Ari, you're the man.
Take care, OC. And, look, to your point, if there was a mutual parting of ways with Kyle Whittingham, then Utah fans can't be upset if Whittingham decides to go elsewhere. And, again, this is a decision that if Whittingham does go elsewhere, will have huge ramifications in the future of whatever program he goes to, and obviously Utah fans and kind of watching from the sidelines. It'll be really interesting to see. Take care, OC.
Happy holidays to you, Ari. Temkin will be checking it. We will get to talking basketball with Ari at some point, but obviously massive news. And look, I deliberately left all of that stuff out of the first half hour of the show, but we have to bring it in now because there are certain words that maybe don't appear in the statement from Bruce Tollner, who is, of course, Kyle Whittingham's agent, or Coach Witt's statement or the university's statement, and I think they're important. We'll discuss next. It's the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Time for the Hot Lunch. Hot Lunch today provided by our friends over at Big Willie's. If you're watching on the YouTube, you can see pesto chicken sandwich today, focaccia bun, perfectly grilled chicken breast, mozzarella on top of a generous helping of their pesto sauce, and fries on the side. Always make sure. We live in Utah, people. Respect the culture and get some fry sauce. Big Willie's has an excellent mix on their fry sauce. The perfect amount of tang. It's just the right color of kind of peachy pink. All right. I want to give respect to the fact that there are people who, for Kyle Whittingham's departure, they feel like it's a wound. All right? It's raw. It's something that they weren't ready for. It's something that even if they were ready for, it still hurt more than you thought it would. And one thing that was very conspicuous in the way the announcement was made was that there's no retirement discussion. There's no retirement language. They don't say retirement. It's, I'm not retiring, I'm stepping down as the head coach. And then Kyle's agent, Bruce Tollner, put out a statement on his LinkedIn, which is the most agent thing in the world, but talking about, the gratitude for and respect and mutual parting of ways between Utah and Kyle Whittingham. Look, you don't have to be careful about the language of something if you're just saying, I'm retiring. And there were a lot of people that came at me and said, well, there's no retirement thing in there because he has that golden parachute job with the program. He gets to be a special advisor in the athletic department or whatever. Yes. You still would say I'm retiring as a coach. That's the language. That's what you say. I'm retiring. You've been expecting that I'm going to retire, and that's what's going to separate me from these duties. I am retiring. There's not a person out there who, when it was announced, hey, Kyle Whittingham's going to be a special advisor to the athletic department, like we talked about with this contract, there's not one person in Ute Nation or beyond to be like, well, hold on a second. He said he was retiring. It's not a retirement if he's going to have this job. From a coaching position, you say I'm retiring if you have no intent to at least kick the tires on other things. And I think it's far less than likely that Kyle Whittingham ends up coaching somewhere else, especially in 2026. I will stand by what I said on social media. I'll stand by what I said on Twitter. I don't think Kyle Whittingham should be seeking the Michigan job. If I'm Michigan, who's right now, by the way, contemplating firing their athletic director, if I'm Michigan, I'm going, man, we could do a lot worse than that guy. We want to get.
I hate it, OC.
We want to get out from under scandal. We want to get out from under accusations. We want to get out from. You hired the most boring hire you possibly could, and I say boring as a compliment here. Kyle Whittingham has exactly nothing attached to his name outside of football. This is a guy who seems like he's really, really into his wife of 60 years. That's not fair. Neither Jamie nor Kyle Whittingham have been old enough to have been married for 60 years, right? For 40 years. This guy really loves his wife too much.
Married when they were 6, 10?
Yeah.
Whatever.
This guy really loves his wife too much. Like, Kyle Whittingham is the squarest of all the possible candidates that they could come up with for that vacancy at Michigan. Again, I don't want to see him anywhere else. I actually kind of do want to see him in the NFL because I know that's something that he would like to do. I would like to see Kyle Whittingham get that opportunity. I don't think he's going to. Maybe the Chiefs now, but they're not going to get rid of Spags. Steve Spagnuolo's not the problem. And
Witt's not retiring from his longtime job, leaving his longtime job to be a linebackers coach, probably in the NFL, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, for him, if it's, well, now it doesn't matter. I don't need any more accolades. I don't need any more championships. I don't need any more accomplishments. Now I just want to say I coached in the NFL. I want to see what it's like coaching pros. I want to be on the same staff that my son is on, although you might be establishing a ceiling over, if your son's trying to climb the ladder and then all of a sudden, my dad wants this same gig I'm applying for. Dang it. No, look, it's a conspicuous absence from any of the language that came from the university itself or from Kyle Whittingham. The university's statement was of appreciation for Kyle Whittingham and everything he's done for the university. Mutual respect. We congratulate him on his well-earned retirement. Does not come into play. Kyle Whittingham's statement says nothing about retirement. His agent's statement says nothing about retirement. And maybe I'm reading too far into this. I promise you I'm not trying to stir the pot, people. My whole thing all year long was, I think Kyle Whittingham is going to retire at the end of this year. Kansas State game, I looked in the stands. I looked on the sideline. I said, that person wouldn't be here if Kyle Whittingham was not retiring. That person wouldn't be here if this was not his last home game. That person is only here because he's going to ride off into the sunset. I promise, you guys know how egotistical I am. I desperately want to sit down here and say, told you so. I knew he was going to be done after this year. And I've been telling you that, and you were pushing back on me all year. The last couple of weeks, someone's just like, I'm sick of you coming on there acting like you know what Kyle Whittingham's going to do. Look, I told you what I thought. I wish I had something that confirmed that, and he had put out there, retirement sounds fun, done. But that's not the language we got. And that is interesting. I don't think he ends up being hired by Michigan. I don't think he ends up being hired for some, lame Colorado State job or something like that. I don't think that there's enough interest. I don't think he's going to uproot himself. He's going to he's going to stay away from the grandkids for months at a time. But why is it not being said the way we thought it would probably be said? Why are there rumors out there that this story is far from over? I'm not going to report on any of them. I'm not going to bring any of them to the airwaves. All of you have friends who think they have sources. The story is not all the way told, it seems. If it were all the way told, we'd be getting retirement. Congrats on your retirement. I want to congratulate my client, Kyle Whittingham, on his retirement because I'm his agent. I'm going to misrepresenting him. Retirement does not exist in any of these statements.
And then as far as anybody who was upset, and we know that there were a lot of you upset about you talking about, hey, Michigan should call him, minutes after the announcement came through. It's our job to talk about the story. And the story is, number one, yes, he's no longer the head coach of Utah football, and wow, what a run he had. Number two, could he coach somewhere else? There's people saying this isn't a retirement. Like that, we're covering the story. I'm sorry you're upset about that.
I want it to be a retirement. I want it to be as close to riding off into the sunset as a Utah lifer. Because that's something that we've been talking about for 2 decades now. I guess we didn't start off talking about it that way, but going all the way back to whatever it was, 2010, hey, he doesn't want to go to Tennessee. He doesn't want an SEC job. He'd rather be here. You know how lucky we are for that? All of that is still true. And I think it's far less likely than it is likely that Kyle Whittingham ends up on a sideline wearing a different shirt next year. I would be shocked, actually, because to Ari Temkin's point as we were finishing that conversation, yes, it matters. Are other teams interested in Kyle Whittingham? What matters far more for this conversation is what is Kyle Whittingham interested in? He doesn't need to do anything. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the prestige. He doesn't need the job. He doesn't need reputation rehab. He doesn't need a dang thing. Does he want to take on a project somewhere else? Does he even want, if Michigan's calling him like they should be, does he want that mess? Or is he going, no, man, I don't want to go to Michigan either?
OC, it would be so hard, and probably I will say probably will be hard if he ends up taking that job. To see Kyle Whittingham beat Ohio State for me, it would be so hard. That would hurt way worse than probably this recent 4-game losing streak when they cheated to beat us. Just kidding, but that would hurt so bad to see Kyle Whittingham do it. So for that reason, just stay away from Michigan, coach.
I want so desperately instead for the conversation to be, well, what we started the show with, and that just be all of it. Kyle Whittingham won 10 games in his final year as a head coach after a 5-win season, after the mess of NIL and transfer portal decimated so many programs that are very much like Kyle Whittingham's program. Oklahoma State and Utah were put like right next to each other constantly about, hey, look at these overachievers. Look what these guys have been doing. And these guys they got hired the same year. Mike Gundy and Kyle Whittingham cut from the same cloth, and they've had the same level of success and results. And, man, we never talk about how many guys they put into the NFL. And those two programs were constantly compared side by side by side. And then for the last 2 years, Oklahoma State has been an absolute mess. And Utah found a way out of it. Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State didn't. I want to be able to sit here and tell you that was as close to the storybook ending as we were going to get. Thank you, Kyle Whittingham. I still echo the thank you, Kyle Whittingham, that it was a great thing. I just have to do it with this hanging participant, with this cliffhanger ending, right? It's like one of those annoying movies. You know what this is, okay? This is the good analogy for me, and then we'll go to break and we'll get Scott Mitchell on the other side. The movie Inception is a phenomenal movie, right? You know when he feels like he finally does all the stuff he needs to do, he jumps through the hoops, he goes down all the way, and he gets the guy out of the third level in the dream world or whatever and brings him back, and then he finally gets to go home and see his kids. And he takes out his little totem, and he puts it on the table, and he spins the top, right? And that's the final shot of the movie, is that thing spinning, and it cuts away right before you know if it's going to wobble and fall over or if it's going to keep spinning. Deliberately, Christopher Nolan said, could he still be in a dream? Or is this truly the happy ending you were looking for? That's what this is. Was this the happy ending we were looking for, where Kyle Whittingham, redemption season, 10 wins, Outland Trophy winner, multiple All-Americans on the roster? I told you I still knew how to coach, and that's enough for me. Or is that top going to wobble as soon as it cuts away, and now we got to see him somewhere else? Cliffhanger endings. I hate them. By the way, I could do a whole show about all the tiny little nuances in that movie. It's a masterfully written movie.
It's one of the best movies ever made, right?
So good.
I wouldn't say, now that being said, I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites. I loved it, but it's not one of my favorites. But you have to watch it. You watch it and go, yeah, that's an incredible movie. That's one of the best quality movies that made in recent years anyway.
And you have to watch it 3 times before you really understand all of the things that they're doing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's really great. And also, I just use the example, when he spins the top. James, you know that the top is not his actual totem?
I actually did not know that.
Okay, we'll talk about it during the break.
Wow.
I'll spoil it for you. Scott Mitchell next on the Sean O'Connell Show. It's Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. All right, we got a jam-packed hour. Scott Mitchell now, Eric Weddle next, Mike Wright after that. Beth Lanier immediately following that. We may or may not have a surprise guest at 1:30. Still trying to figure out if that's going to happen. Sean O'Connell Show here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. And our next guest is the host of the Down and Dirty, which precedes my show. He's a Utah football legend. He is Scott Mitchell. Hey, Scott.
Hello, Sean.
So we've been talking all day about it because the news broke after this show was over on Friday, and you were filling in for me on my show on Friday. So right after you finished talking for 3 hours last Friday, the announcement came that Kyle Whittingham was done as the University of Utah's head coach. Now, there were a lot of people, myself included, who thought that this was coming by the end of the year. There were other people who said, no, he's going to come back. And it seems like, depending on which rumor you listen to, maybe both are right. But let's go back to when you first read it, you first saw it, you got the email that Kyle Whittingham was done. That's as official as it needs to be. We will not see him as the head coach at Utah anymore. What were your thoughts?
I think it's a kind of a shock, more than anything, even though there's been a lot of speculation about it. I've been asked about it a million times. I've wondered about it, what's going to happen. And regardless of what I thought should or shouldn't happen or wasn't going to, just the idea of it is shocking, but it's also a little scary. It's a little scary because of, what you have in Coach Whittingham. You look at this private equity arrangement, it feels like the university is really making a commitment to fund and be competitive in the athletic department and in athletics in this crazy world of college sports. So you have a great coach who's had a proven track record of really getting the most out of players, and I just can't imagine what it would have been like to have him with that capability and really, really good players. It felt like lightning in a bottle to me. But on the other hand, it's like, look, we're moving in a different direction. We're committing to our athletic program with this private equity firm, and it was probably just a good breaking point. We're going in a new direction as an athletic department. We want the football program to go in a new direction. They just hired a new basketball coach, and so I just think it was kind of the right time to say, let's have a reset and let's move forward in a different direction.
Well, that different direction has been laid out for quite some time now, and that different direction is Morgan Scalley, who, of course, played here, coached his entire career so far here, and now elevates from defensive coordinator to head coach. That announcement was made official this weekend as well, and we're yet to hear the opening statement, so to speak, the winning press conference or not from Morgan Scalley. I think is going to have to wait till maybe after the bowl game. But what were your thoughts that, what we thought was going to happen actually did?
Well, the one thing that's one of the really key things for Utah having success over the last 25 years is that the continuity of the coach and the coaching staff to a lot of degree. And Morgan has been a big part of that continuity. It's how you're going to compete if you're Utah, to have coaches that stick around and really build culture and do all that. And I think if anyone's been groomed and prepared to be that type of coach at Utah, I think it's Morgan. I mean, he grew up here. He's a lifer. He played at Utah. He has a passion for it. I think probably more than maybe any person alive. And there's a lot of us who have a great passion for Utah and Utah football. But I think that helps. You look at other situations and coaches that have coached at their alma mater, and I think there's just a little added incentive that I think permeates into teams. Look at Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State and Jonathan Smith when he was at Oregon State, and there have been others. So I really like it. Now, the one maybe drawback, and it remains to see if it's a drawback, is this is the only place that Morgan's coached. He's never been a head coach. Is he really totally ready for that? You look at a guy like Jay Hill, who kind of went off and went to Weber State and got some experience there as a coach and because it's a different ball game when it's a different responsibility. It's all eyes are on you, and so is the public. Morgan just hides behind, hey, I'm the defensive coordinator, but now I got to answer to everyone, and that includes all the players and all the people that are going to be pecking at my time and want my attention, and and it takes a skill set to be able to do that, and so we'll see. I mean, Morgan's very capable, and I think he's the very best person you could have in that position for Utah, if not just because he is someone who I think would want to stay at Utah. I don't think Morgan, Morgan's had opportunities to go other places as a coordinator, and he hasn't, because I think he really wants to be there. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do. I'm excited to see his personality, because this is going to take on Morgan Scalley's personality, and his personality is not Coach Witt, even though they're kind of built out of the same cloth. They still are different, and it'll be fun to see what Morgan Scalley's personality comes out in with this football team.
So Kyle Whittingham was in a similar situation where he was a coordinator who was elevated to his first head coaching position, and I think it's fair to say that there's always like some growing pains that come with that as you decide, how much you want to be like your predecessor, or how much you want to put your own stamp on a program. Now, Coach Witt was taking over for Urban Meyer, who's someone that, was only here for a couple years, and it's not like Coach Witt played for Urban Meyer. So I think that the Meyer influence on Witt is a lot different than the Witt influence on Morgan Scalley. But as we try to predict the similarities and the differences that we're going to see, is there anything that jumps out to you? Is there something, can you make a prediction that, Witt does this, and I know that Morgan's going to do it this way, or is it all wait and see?
Well, I think it's like maybe it's about strategy, maybe it's about emphasis. Kyle was really focused on defense, and maybe that carries over, but maybe it has a little bit of a twist to it. Maybe there's more of an emphasis. They got away from focusing on special teams. Maybe that emphasis comes back. I think too, like your comment about Urban and he wasn't really around a lot. I think what you pick up from people is you pick up I liked how he handled that. I liked how he handled our off season. I liked how he handled weekly preparation. The organization of practice. I liked how he kind of, his focus or his emphasis. And so you pick little pieces and parts. You hear a lot of these assistant coaches, and, I think of John Gruden, and he said, all the time that I was being an assistant, I was taking notes of the coach and situations. It's like, how would I handle this? And I believe Morgan, especially knowing that he was going to be the head coach eventually at Utah, I would imagine he's going around probably talking or watching Kyle and other coaches. I'm sure they all talk and share ideas and thoughts. I think the football community in general is really, really gracious that way. Even from college to pros. I mean, guys are going to places. So I think it's really good that you pick, ideas, but you have to own it and have to be authentic to who you really are. So whatever that looks like for Morgan, he's younger. He's pretty feisty. He's pretty competitive. I'm just fascinated to see how all of that comes out in how he is as a coach and how he communicates that to a team. But it's so vital that, he doesn't try to be Kyle, and I don't think he will, but he really has to be his own person. That's what's going to resonate. That authenticity is going to matter, and the players will respond to it when he's being real and genuine with him. And he's been a guy that's been great responding to, the players really have responded to him. I think one of the things Kyle has always been challenged with at Utah is finding a consistent offense. It's just been a revolving door of coordinators And maybe that's something Morgan has some ideas or thoughts on. Really like Jason Beck. It'll be hard to keep Jason Beck around. He continues to coach like this. He may go and get a job somewhere else as a head coach or something. Who knows? But I think finding more consistent effort on offense would be an awesome thing if Morgan was able to do that. Now, this year was tremendous offensively, and maybe he should look at the defense. But I think overall, having both sides of the ball and special teams play well, that could be a fun thing to see if Morgan could figure out.
Scott Mitchell's our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. So Coach Witt said that he plans on coaching the Vegas Bowl, that after that it'll be Morgan Scalley's program. It'll be Morgan Scalley's team. What do you think that's going to look like? We saw that in the Fiesta Bowl 21 years ago, where Urban and Kyle were co-head coaches, but really it was Urban coaching his last game, and then you pass the mantle from there. What do you think it's going to look like?
Well, I think if anyone understands it, it would be Kyle, because he has been in the situation before. Personally, I would probably think it would be awkward, and maybe it's like one of those, hey, like we had senior day a few weeks ago. Maybe it's like that. This is our coach's senior day. It's his last hurrah. He's meant a tremendous amount to the program. He's coached all of these players for a long period of time. He's been their head coach, not Morgan, and so I think having that final, bow and that game together is probably meaningful. And these bowl games that especially Utah's in now are a celebration. They're a reward for a job well done, and so I hope that's what it is. I hope that it's just the time that he gets to spend and really say goodbye to everyone. And it's one of those situations where you have a loved one who dies suddenly, and it's such a shock, and it's like, wow, I wished I had a chance. Or if you have a loved one, which I experienced with my parents who were sick over time, that I really appreciated having a long time to say goodbye to them and really, kind of savor every last minute I could with them. And it's kind of a similar type of situation to really, really have that closure in a very healthy way that, I think helps everyone move on. I just, it's always an awkward situation, but I think if you looked at it that way, I think it could be really meaningful and help everyone move forward.
Is this a retirement announcement to you? The retirement does not appear in anybody's statements, but are you treating it as such?
I never got a sense from Kyle during the season that he was done. I think that's why this is a little shocking to me, because I still think he was very energized about turning everything around the season that they had. I think he was energized about, like, okay, let's build off of 10-2 and let's, we're really close to getting to the conference championship and go to the playoffs. So I think, and I don't know what stepping down actually means. Because I would imagine that he still has an obligation contractually with the school, with the remaining years or whatever he has on his contract. I don't know what that is, but I would imagine that he would look, I know there've been a lot of speculation, but you have to admit, if you're a coach and you might have an opportunity to go to a place like Michigan and just see what it's like, just sit in the chair. Who cares what the results are? Just go there and just to have that experience, which maybe is a little selfish. And of course, I think he wouldn't ever do it unless he felt he could be competitive. But what's it like to be in one of the top programs in the country, to have such a deep tradition? I think he would be a perfect fit at a place like Michigan. I don't think it would be. I think it'd be awkward if it was somewhere that wasn't like that. You'd be like, yeah, okay, if he was in another Big 12 school, or if he was in the ACC somewhere, or in I don't know how he would feel about going to the SEC. Maybe be like, I'd love it, but man, there's a great opening at Michigan, and he feels like a great fit. And if he could figure it out, I would just say, go, just do it, try it out, see what happens.
I heard you talking about this on your show today, so I know it's okay to bring up. Rob Reiner tragically passed away, it sounds like yesterday. Stand By Me, Princess Bride, A Few Good Men, or When Harry Met Sally?
I'll take all of them. I think that's the beautiful thing about he was so talented at storytelling in so many different ways. I love Stand By Me. I watch A Few Good Men, A Princess Bride. Really, here's what's great about what Rob Reiner did. I could watch any one of those movies today. And I've watched them multiple times. I mean, gosh, I don't even know how many times I've watched A Few Good Men. So that's just a testament to who he is. That his stories are timeless. That it's not a movie you go, yeah, I saw that. I don't really care to see it again. It's like, no, I'll watch that over and over again. And I'm just, I'm heartbroken by it. And I'm sure it sounds like, it's very devastating and probably a domestic violence situation, and you just hate to see that, you really do. And so I'm just, my heart goes out to him and his family, but what an amazing talent he was.
Scott, always great catching up with you. Appreciate you giving us some time today. Thank you, sir.
You got it. Have a great day, Sean.
Scott Mitchell, Utah football legend, hosted the Down and Dirty right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. So, look, it's a really difficult situation to try to understand the plan right now, like today. You're Kyle Whittingham. You've got a bowl game to help your team get ready for. Your team knows that you're not going to be the head coach next year. They also know that it is going to be Morgan Scalley, who is your successor, who is a guy that you've had a relationship with now for, I don't know, roughly 30 years. I think Morgan committed in 99, if I'm not mistaken, which means he was recruited at least in 1998. So we're coming up on almost 30 years of a relationship one way or another between those two guys. And now they're going to presumably, do their best to get on the same page for this one last time, and then we'll see how it plays out from there. But the handoff, you can't say the handoff is uncomplicated, especially given, the timing of it, the fact that it is not like I'm going to finish out this college football playoff run or whatever. It's you're going to go play against Nebraska and just try and beat them and send Coach Witt out the right way. My hope is that that's enough of an incentive for most of these players, if not all these players, to participate in the bowl game wholeheartedly. I mean, you get to be part of the team, the last team that is coached by Kyle Whittingham, who is the legendary guy in this program's history. I wonder how it's going to play out. All right, got to take a quick one here. Eric Weddle's going to join us on the other side, give us his thoughts. It'll be Mike Wright shortly after that. Don't go anywhere. Sean O'Connell Show on a Monday, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show on a Monday. Usually we catch up with Eric Weddle on a Thursday, but I wanted to get him on Monday to react to the massive news that broke last Friday that Kyle Whittingham was stepping down as head coach at the University of Utah. He will coach one last game, but it is the Vegas Bowl coming up on New Year's Eve against Nebraska. There are very few players who are more tightly associated with Kyle Whittingham than Eric Weddle. There are very few players that Kyle Whittingham would use to boost his own resume that belong in the same category as our next guest, because the story goes, and you've all heard it many times, Kyle Whittingham wanted Eric Weddle, and it wasn't even certain that that was going to play out. Weddle was, of course, one of the unsung heroes of that recruiting class that went on to be arguably the greatest player in the history of Utah football. And we're lucky enough to have him be a friend of the show, and he joins us now. E-Dub, what's up?
What's up, my brother? Long time no talk. Been a week or less than that. I don't know. I don't even know anymore, but crazy week, crazy weekend of just sports and good football, bad football, and our freaking head coach that all I've ever known is stepping down and moving on. It's crazy. It's crazy, but just to honor the man, the myth, the legend of Coach Witt. And I mean, seriously, like when I sit back and think of Coach Witt, I'm kind of at a loss of words of what he means to me and how much I've learned and grown and matured and still to this day learn from him. It's just, you sit back and just am humbled and grateful to be around him and for him to believe in me. And when not many people did, back 25 years ago. So it's just a crazy time and just grateful to be around him.
Well, I know you've told the story plenty of times, but just for the listeners who haven't heard it from your mouth, I mean, Urban wasn't even so sure about Eric Weddle being his guy, and Witt was, right? I mean, give us the details on how that went down.
Yeah, I mean, basically, Coach Witt came to my house to meet my parents and with Coach Meyer, and this was Coach Meyer's first recruiting class. And before they walk in, he's basically, Coach Meyer's like asking Coach Witt again, like, are you sure about this kid? Like, I don't know. I've watched him. I'm not too sure on him. Are you sure? Are you sure? And Coach Witt to this day believed in me and was like, listen, I know this kid. I've watched him. He's the best kid I've seen and I want him. And so like, if that conversation never happened or if he never like was that convicted to want me and offer me a scholarship and believe in me, like none of this would have happened. I really believe that. And so just, thankful and honored to play under him, to be coached by him, to be a father figure to me, like he has been to so many people. And he's as good as it gets.
We opened the show today, and one of the many things I ended up rambling on about, and it really, to me, is an important thing, especially in this modern era of college football, is that you look at these last 21 years, and for the most part, I'm talking player behavior, I'm talking off-the-field scandals, I'm talking all that stuff. It still feels like Utah football, the vast majority of the years that Kyle Whittingham has been over the top of, you can be proud of this program, and you can be proud of pretty much every player in this program. Nobody's perfect. No program is perfect. We don't expect young men to be perfect. But it feels like the principles that he preached were also practiced. And you know this better than I do because you were in the program longer than I was, in a much more important part of the program than I was. But to me that matters because other teams, and we've seen it over and over again, it feels like there's a trade-off a lot of times where you kind of, okay, we'll let some bad guys be out there playing for us because they're fast or they're big or they're strong. And we'll look the other way on this particular situation in the effort of making sure he's eligible so that we can win some games. And there's plenty of examples about how, this team under Kyle Whittingham kind of refused to do that. And I think it matters, especially in a place like Utah, in this community, that you not only have a good team that you're proud of on the field, but that you can then kind of look at yourself in the mirror as a fan away from the field and for the most part be like, yeah, even when they have problems, I think they deal with them the right way. And I expect the same thing from Morgan, but I felt like it was an important thing to state about Witt's legacy because it's a massive thing in my mind.
I 100% agree, and it should be talked about more than it is, of coaches having a standard and doing things the right way and not having scandals and not trying to do things behind the apron and do things by the book. And no one's perfect. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying he's a perfect individual, but I'm also sitting here saying that we're not a Michigan and have scandals and you're going to have inquiries and investigations. Like, you don't have that. And as an organization, as a school, I mean, that's something that he'll be remembered by. I mean, his family, how important that is to him, his father and what he learned from him, and his beautiful, lovely, supporting wife and Jamie and the kids and everything intertwined. Like, that is just as important and probably even more so than the wins and losses of how he conducted himself and how he represented himself, his last name, and ultimately the university. Like, that's important. And I think it gets glossed over as not, and it should be recognized as such.
So Friday we get the statement, the announcement from Kyle Whittingham and from the university, and then Saturday, as expected, the second announcement is, yes, Kyle is moving on, and Morgan Scalley, the head coach in waiting, has now officially been elevated. He is the next head coach at the University of Utah, and this is a guy who even on another level beyond how well you know Coach Witt, because you played alongside Morgan Scalley. You guys played together, and you've known him for just as long. So your thoughts on Morgan as the next head coach?
Yeah, I mean, it's been known. I guess we'd all say and know. It's not like it hasn't been earned. I tell people this: Morgan's been put in this position since 2008 when he came on staff as a GA, and he's been put in every role, every leadership role. He's had to learn, had to work, had to grind, had his ups and downs, his good and the bad, and he's been groomed for this position, and he's earned it. And he's a Utah man through and through, right? And so from the minute he was born, he's been a Utah guy. And that's just impactful. That's powerful. He's going to give everything he has to this university because of the love and the desire that he has in his heart for it. So I've told people this multiple times. You're not going to get a guy from the outside to come coach here. It's just not going to happen, and we don't want that. So he's someone that I'm confident in, that he's going to move us in the right direction into this landscape, and he's the perfect guy for the job.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about another guy that you played with and are very familiar with, who came off the couch after 5 years and played pretty darn well for the Colts. What have you said to Phillip Rivers after his performance this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I texted him when it all went down. I know he was getting flooded. I'm sure. I also let him know I know exactly what he's feeling, and not many people could be a soundboard for him and someone that he could just talk with, because it's not something of an easy situation to be in, coming off the couch and trying to do things that you haven't been doing for a while. So he didn't reach back. And then the day of the game, I just sent a simple text that I love him. Trust your eyes, trust your instincts, and go enjoy it for all of us. And so he told me he loved me. And then we talked after the game just about the game and the good and the bad and what could have been. And he was just bummed about the loss. But just, man, it's just a great a reminder to just go for it. And you never know what could happen, and you could be scared. You don't know what opportunities can do, but you also don't know what can happen if you don't go for it. And so it's just a cool story. And he talked about being better this week with another week of practice and get a little more aggressive. But just I mean, it's kind of speechless. I mean, sitting and looking at it, like 5 years, and he's back playing in the NFL. Like, it's amazing.
Well, it is unique because I don't know how many guys ever have done that, but you are one of the few who have, and we've had this conversation before. You know, the first week you came off the couch, and you had to treat it a certain way. You had to treat your body a certain way. You had to treat the impacts in the game a certain way. And then week 2, a little better. Week 3, even better. I mean, what kind of growth will he experience? I know the position is different between week 1 of getting back and used to the speed and the picture and all that to week 2, because he played pretty well in week 1. Do you expect even more next Monday night against the Niners?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I brought up, I was like, gosh, like I wish Shane was just a little more aggressive on first down for him, because after like the first series, you know, you could see does he have the same arm strength? No, you could tell, like, but after that first series, you could tell his confidence and just his aura and the way he was seeing it. Like, I would have started pressing a little bit more to give him, you knew it was going to be hard to move the ball. So give him some easier chances, because you get to 3rd and 5 and 3rd and 7s, and it's just everyone knows you're throwing the ball. Then they can dial up the pass rush in the games. Like, that was my only drawback from watching him in the play calling, but knew and understood why. Like, I'm not dumb, and that was what they felt, how they were going to win that game. But moving forward, like another week of practice, like you guys got to remember, like he came off, he did a throwing session Monday, did a throwing session Tuesday, full practice Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Like, I got to believe, he would never say this, but I got to believe his arm was dead. His body, everything was in a shock. So now he gets into a normal rhythm. He can get into a normal breakdown and studying and rehab. Like, I think he's going to ball next week, and I'm just fingers crossed they can get on a run and make something out of this opportunity, because it's just a great story, and I don't want it to end.
How old are you now? 40?
I'm 40, yes.
All right.
I'll be 41 in about 30 days.
All right, we got 4 more years of Eric Weddle's eligibility for a call back to the NFL.
No chance, no way. I could go back as a player coach where I dress up just to get the insurance reset, because like he did, it is a real thing, mind you. Like, it's not a joke. Like, we're going to be in a world of hurt in 2 more years when my insurance goes out, and like everybody else, I have to deal with that. So, not that I don't pay for insurance, it's just that I get the best of the best in a premium at a lower cost, where now I won't. So that is a real thing. I got 5 years, and so I got 2 years left. But no, I would love to. I'm just living through him, and hopefully he can do some fun things with it.
Now, this does reset his eligibility for the Hall of Fame clock. Do you think that mattered to him at all, because he had to make that decision?
No, we don't. You're not thinking about that. Like, that's something that you can't control, right? And you're either going to get in or you're not. And, whether it's the first year or the 15th year, the Hall of Fame is the Hall of Fame. So I don't think that had any bearing. I think all the factors, and can I do it? Can I not? This, that, like that was, I don't even think that was on the table.
Dub, always appreciate your time. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season. We'll talk soon.
You got it, bro. Love ya. Go Utes. Can't wait. I'll be out there for the bowl game. So the fans, I don't know if we'll talk before that. We probably will. But if you're out there, you see me, come say what's up. Let's take a picture, and let's go cheer on our boys and get a win.
We will talk before then, because if we don't get Eric Weddle on every week, then the show's just dead. So
Right.
we'll talk soon, dude. Thank you.
You got it.
That's Eric Weddle, the Utah football legend. We'll talk with another one, Mike Wright, next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Well, welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Welcome in Mike Wright, former Utah football linebacker, leading tackler from that special Sugar Bowl season, and, of course, a man who was coached by Kyle Whittingham through, I will say, the formative years of Kyle Whittingham's head coaching tenure. Mike Wright, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing good, OC. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you giving us some time and your thoughts on Kyle Whittingham stepping down. You got the news probably right around the same time that everyone else did, because they were really good at keeping the lid on this one. But Friday afternoon, Kyle Whittingham and the university make their announcement. What were your first thoughts?
I was a little bit in disbelief. It has been rumors for years and years, and I'm still kind of waiting to see how this all plays out. But I kind of just got the news as everybody else through social media. Still a little bit in disbelief. Just Coach Witt's just too much of a competitor. I have a hard time believing that he's stepping away.
So I wanted to get a guy like you, a guy from your era on, because you went through like the first, I'm trying to get my feet wet as a head coach type of years into, well, we're an undefeated team and this is the high watermark for Utah football, and still to this day in its history in beating Alabama in a Sugar Bowl. And I went through that kind of first spring ball transition when Kyle Whittingham was taking things over, and I don't know what he would say about it, but my perception is that, you know, he had to grow into the role just like anybody would taking on a brand new job. You were there for, you know, with a front row seat to a lot of it. How smooth a transition do you think that was? How difficult do you think it was to go from being, you know, the coordinator who only had to worry about one side of the ball, the defense, to being the face of the program, et cetera? Because obviously he handled it well and pretty quickly, but it wasn't perfect.
Yeah, no, I was there my freshman year, or my first year on campus up there, was Coach Witt's second year as a head coach. And, you know, so some of those guys might have seen something the year before. And, you know, I think Witt, you know, obviously had a lot of tenure as a defensive coordinator up at the University of Utah. And then, you know, he had, you know, the opportunity to kind of watch Urban Meyer. And I think that, you know, for those 2 years that Urban was the head coach, and so him stepping into that head coach role, I think that, you know, he, you know, kind of had to like pick and choose of kind of like what he wanted to take from Urban, what was his personal like spin that he wanted to put on it. And so, yeah, I mean, he's definitely kind of going through a transition phase. And, you know, I think, you know, where I saw even more was even like, you know, not to switch the subject, but Kalani, like watching Kalani go from a position coach into a defensive coordinator type role, like, was a huge adjustment for him, and just like the added pressure and everything like that. So I think, you know, and then he kind of like ultimately kind of just moved into that role as, you know, defense, you know, and obviously he moved on to what he's doing down at BYU. So I think there's definitely a learning curve and adjustment that was going on. And Coach Witt, I think, had a pretty decent transition, smooth transition. But there was definitely some learning in those first couple of years. And then, you know, fortunately, you know, like within his fourth year of being a head coach, we had that big Sugar Bowl year. And so I think that like personnel and opportunity kind of just presents itself for like early success in Coach Witt's career. And he was able to obviously have those Rose Bowl years and have some good years, you know, after that time. But he's, you know, it's, you know, I think early on you know, as a head coach, there's definitely some learning curve.
Mike Wright is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Former Utah linebacker, went through those formative years and anchored the defense in that Sugar Bowl season, as I already told you. So how long did it take for Kyle Whittingham to realize, all right, I got something with Mike Wright? Because everyone has their own personal story with their position coach, their coordinator, and then their head coach, kind of like either learning to trust them, or for some of us, it never really happened, right? But like, how long did it take for Kyle Whittingham to come around on, all right, Mike Wright's the guy?
Oh man, I would love for Coach Witt to answer that question myself. But you know, for me, you know, like my background might have been a little bit different. Like, you know, I don't, coming in as a walk-on. I don't know what his expectations were, you know, for me. I think probably, you know, early on in my career, he was looking at, you know, people that they had recruited, you know, how can we get these guys to actually start producing? But then I think there was kind of like there was just a string of guys that, you know, maybe kind of, you know, led to like, hey, let's give some of these guys these walk-ons some opportunity. You know, there was other guys in the program with me, like JJ Williams is an example. Like, you know, he worked his way up. He was a walk-on, became the starter in 2006 and, you know, produced. And so I think he kind of helped pave the way for me. I think that, you know, maybe, halfway through my sophomore year, where I had a couple of opportunities to go out and play a lot more. And, you know, I had a breakout game against Colorado State. And then I followed up, you know, a game after that against Wyoming, where I think I had 2 sacks that game. And so or a sack and a couple of TFLs. But, you know, I think kind of halfway through my sophomore year. So it took me a good year and a half in the program to where I think Coach Witt, maybe, thought they might have had something, but then, definitely like challenged me through, even like after having given maybe like, hey, here's the nod, like we're expecting you to be the starter come next year. But I remember that spring, just kind of random practices where they're just like, hey, we're going to test him. And, through somebody else out there as kind of like the starter playing with the ones, and just pissed me off, for the rest of that practice. And I, for the next couple of strings of practices, just made it a point to become the guy again, or move back and, taking reps with the ones, and then didn't relinquish that for those final 2 years. But I think it took me about a year and a half to get in his good graces, no doubt.
So now that there is going to be, a different flavor to the program, I mean, it's Morgan. It's not like you're going with some offensive guru. It's a guy who played for Coach Witt, whose entire coaching career has been under Kyle Whittingham. How closely do you think the brand of football under Morgan Scalley is going to resemble the brand that we've seen for the last 21 years?
I mean, I think it's going to be pretty similar. I know Morgan. I've had an opportunity to not play with him, but kind of seemed like, he was a GA, watched him play closely, and just watched him grow within the program. I mean, it's awesome that he's getting an opportunity because, he's a Utah guy through and through. He hasn't been at any other school. And so I think it's going to look a lot the same. But definitely have his own flair to him, which I'm excited to see. What him in a head coaching role is going to look like. I think it's going to. I think it'll follow a similar thing as Coach Witt, as far as just like his overall methodology. What he brings to the program. Scally kind of brought in a kind of a different, mindset, or just like kind of like the same approach, but just kind of backed up all the things that Coach Witt would say. So, it'll be interesting to see what he brings, and what he brings to maybe, working alongside the offense with, Jason Beck, like with Coach Beck, and what how the two of them would, potentially work together. I'm excited to see that, and then just like who they bring in for that that defensive coach position, or just what that shuffle looks like. But I kind of like always was suspicious that Coach Witt was kind of always whispering in the ears of their OCs of kind of like, hey, just get me a lead and we're gonna just run the clock out kind of a thing, or there's we never like fully knew what was going on with those types of conversations. But so it'll be interesting to see how Morgan interacts with his coaching staff that he puts together, and what they're able to do. But I would expect that a lot of it is like just the mindset, the nuances, just the way things are run, from practices to game planning, everything like that. That's going to look, a lot, pretty much the same as what a Coach Whittingham program looked like.
Do you think that the bowl game is the last time we see Kyle Whittingham coaching?
That's a good question. I don't have any knowledge of that. I've been texting these coaches after all this came out. I text Morgan, text Witt, text Kalani, all these guys that I think they got inundated with a ton of text messages over, the last couple of weeks. It's been an interesting time in college football, especially here in the state of Utah. So I have a hard time seeing this being the last time. I look at a guy like Coach John Pease that was a special, advisor for a while on campus. Like Coach Pease was up on campus well before I was, just always hanging around. He was a good resource hanging around, and then before you know it, he's the full-time coach, right? And so I kind of always perceive like Coach Whittingham having some transition years of maybe not being the head coach, but he's he's a guy that's hanging out and he's helping with the game plan and he's watching a lot of film. I just have a hard time seeing, thinking that this is it for him, where he's just always super competitive in everything that he does. Like when I was on campus, he was playing tennis against the women's tennis team and talking crap with them, or he's just playing golf. Like he's bringing Tony Finau to be his partner at the golf tournament. He's just a super competitive guy. And so, I have a hard time believing that he's fully stepped away. So I kind of am curious to see what the new chapter in his life looks like. But yeah, I have a hard time believing that this is going to be his last coaching experience, or this bowl game. I have a hard time believing that that's his last thing.
Mikey, always appreciate your time, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, OC. You have a good one.
Mike Wright, leading tackler on your Sugar Bowl Utes. And he was a walk-on. He was a transfer in. He followed Gary Anderson. You remember Gary Anderson went down to Southern Utah temporarily and then came back to coach when Kyle Whittingham got elevated to head coach. Well, Mike Wright came with him. Christian Cox came with him. And those guys ended up being unbelievable players that helped anchor that defense. ESPN 791 FM and the Rocky Mountain Chevy dealers invite you to help those at the road home this holiday season. They need blankets, coats, shoes, hats, gloves, anything for the cold weather. Drop off donations at any Rocky Mountain Chevy dealer. Visit ESPN700sports.com for all those dealer locations. Spread the warmth and help others find their way home. All right. Kyle Whittingham, not the only long-tenured head coach at the University of Utah to be stepping away. Beth Lanier also made that announcement. We'll talk with the former now, that's a weird thing to say, former now Utah volleyball head coach Beth Lanier next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Trying to find the right balance today in making sure we touch on everything with the Kyle Whittingham retirement announcement, Morgan Scalley stepping up to the role that he's been preparing himself for multiple years now. And look, I would be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge that there are some rumblings that, Kyle Whittingham is not retiring officially, that this is going to be a breakup of sorts, mutually agreed upon and rooted in respect. And I'll take the statements from his agent, from Kyle Whittingham's agent, from Kyle Whittingham, and from the University of Utah at face value. I mean, these relationships are always very complicated, but I think they've been incredibly successful, so no reason to ruin a good thing. And it felt like there's a lot of people, a lot of fans who felt like this was the right time for Kyle Whittingham to step away. I mean, even in this 10-2 year, and people are probably going to deny it now, but I throw out the number for the text line every single day, 877-353-0700. And even in this 10-2 year, there were a lot of people saying, like, it's over, it's done, especially after the BYU game. And I was yelling about the BYU game, but not in the same vein of like, hey, Kyle Whittingham needs to be done. There are fans that felt like now was the right time, and obviously Kyle Whittingham and the school came to that same conclusion that now was the right time. The word retirement was conspicuously absent from many of the acknowledgments, but maybe that's just me reading between the lines too much. I have a tendency to do that sometimes. Now, my next guest, as far as we know, there's no question whatsoever. It is indeed a retirement. Beth Lanier announced her retirement last week after 36 years at the University of Utah, 20 NCAA tournament appearances, and she's kind enough to give us some time today on the Sean O'Connell Show. Coach, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thank you, and I'm doing well. I don't know, it's about day 4 or 5 of true retirement, and figuring it out, and a long road ahead of me.
Okay, so what does that feel like when, I'm sure it's a decision you're contemplating for some time, and you come to the conclusion like, all right, I'm going to make the announcement, and then you actually do. What is the feeling? Is it a relief? Is it terrifying? Are you emotional in the quiet moments? If you're willing to, take me into that process.
Yeah, sure. Well, I definitely have been thinking about it. You don't make this decision overnight. And, once I knew, I knew before the end of the season. So to be honest, we had that great run towards the end of the season. And I was pretty emotional kind of at every match because I knew, there were kind of milestones that were happening. Our big win against BYU, I knew that was the last time I was going to play them in the Huntsman Center. So that was really meaningful. And of course, our run getting into the NCAA tournament. But, the toughest part last week was on Monday of telling the team. And, with the transfer portal how it is now, I just felt like it was best to just do it right away and not mess around. And so, but Monday was really tough telling the players. But I just was very honest and we, we can talk about that. But, and then Wednesday was a press conference, and I have to tell you, the University of Utah Athletic Department did a phenomenal job with the press conference, with acknowledging, my body of work at the U, and then introducing Alyssa DeRico as the next head coach. That was emotional, but it was wonderful. There were probably over 100 people there. We did it down in Crimson Court, talked a lot about the history of the program to make sure, people were going to understand where the roots were, while also passing the torch on to Alyssa. So it's been a lot of emotion for the last month or two, and probably the last month. And then, I woke up Thursday morning and I went, oh, wow, this is it. I really did it. And had to kind of think of what I was going to do that day. So, yeah, it's been a lot of emotions, but I never wavered once I made the decision, and I feel really good about it. And I'm just really excited for, the next chapter and new adventures.
So hold up. if you don't mind rewinding a bit, when you say you were really honest with the players, what does that look like? Because it is a different time in all of college sports, and some of these women came to play specifically for you. So how do those conversations with players go, aside from just the emotion?
I think I'm I've been here 36 years, so people can assume what my age is, and I think my players knew it was going to happen. I know incoming recruits, it was certainly a question on with every incoming recruit that we've brought in recently and still that are committed, and in good faith, I always was honest with them that I really didn't know when it was going to happen, and I'd hope to coach as many of them as I've been recruiting as possible. But I was honest with them in just saying that it was time to take care of me. It was time to give my time to me, my family, my health, and that it was hard to walk away because I love coaching and I love my players, and I love that interaction and everything that has to do with coaching. But I also knew that I just couldn't keep going at the pace and the intensity that I had been going at it for 36 years, and I just knew it was time. So I was just very honest with them about that, and I don't think I think they were shocked, but not surprised, and understood, and just gave me an outpouring of love and support and understanding, to be honest.
Beth Lanier is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show. It sounds weird even coming out of my mouth. Now, former Utah volleyball coach announced her retirement last week after 36 years on the job and 20 NCAA tournament appearances, countless all-conference players, and now you pass the torch to an assistant. You already mentioned her, Alyssa Dorico, who was born the same year that you took over the program at the University of Utah. So what should we know about her and expect from her?
Okay, that's funny. I've never realized she was born the same year I took over the program. She was my associate head coach. She has been an assistant or associate for 10 years, I guess, 10 or 12 years. She has built her craft. She has built her resume. And she is built to be a head coach. The fans of Utah athletics are going to love Alyssa Dorico. She has got a competitive fire like no other. She is a workhorse. Her work ethic's second to none. She cares about the athletes. She's got she really does have the whole package. So it wasn't difficult for me to recommend her. And I'm so glad the athletic department, did the same thing with Kyle and Morgan. There's something to say for succession. And I've had a lot of conversations with Alyssa over the last few months about, what this is going to be like, and just try to mentor her as much as possible. And but she's ready. For those of your listeners that don't know, Alyssa Dorico won 4 national championships at Penn State. There's only 3 athletes in the history of NCAA Division I volleyball that have done that, and that was her and her 2 freshman roommates. They went through the program together. So she's just a great competitor, but she's an even better coach and even better person, and I think she's going to do great things for this program.
So there's a lot of us who we have these like hobbies that we'd like to pick up, and we say, "Oh, I don't have time to do it, but someday I'm going to do it." And most of us are lying to ourselves probably when we say we don't have enough time. But coaches probably aren't lying to themselves because all of you spend so much time in your craft and with the job. Now, I assume you're getting a lot of that time back. So is there a thing that you've had an eye on for however many years that you're like, that's something I will use my free time whenever I get it, I'm going to use my free time learning this or doing this or going here. Do you know what that is yet, Coach?
I don't think I do. I tried not to overplan. I felt like I was just going to, number one, just have to recover from the season, number 2, from a career. So I honestly, what I'm doing is a lot of house projects, a lot of depiling, a lot of just kind of getting my life in order, I think is the first thing on my agenda because, like you said, coaches, we travel so much and just don't have time for things like that. And so that's kind of first on my list, not very exciting. And now I'm starting to plan, some vacations that I have been wanting to do. I've got a lot of family around the country I want to, connect with. And travel the world, to be honest. Like, I've got a lot of destinations I want to go to that I haven't had a chance, although volleyball has taken me around the world quite a bit as well. So nothing major. Every single person I talk to say, number one, you're going to love retirement. And number two, you're not going to be able to do nothing. And right now, all I want to do is nothing. But I know that will change, and I'm just going to be kind of open to whatever that is. But I'm going to take my time and just try to, to be honest, the other thing, I was never very good at working out during the season, and that's something I am looking forward to, and getting back hiking and skiing and just getting a little bit more physically active to stay healthy at my age. So, yeah, those are kind of the things I got planned for right now.
I want to make sure I ask this question the right way, but there's always a part of the conversation when we talk about a coach who's been involved in college athletics for a long time. If they're moving on or they're stepping down, regardless of, how well they competed right up to the end or how many championships they won or whatever, there's, in these last 5 years especially, there's been this, well, that's an old school coach and we're in the new age now. So, of course, he's moving on. Of course, she's moving on. Mm-hmm. How much does it have to do with your decision to retire now, that it is a different world that you've had to adjust to in these last 5 years?
Yeah, I certainly get asked that question a lot. And, it is very different. When the transfer portal came to be and NIL and rev share, to be honest, if I thought that, I wasn't going to be successful. So I decided a few years ago to lean into it. And I just looked at it as another kind of competition, another challenge. And when I get challenges in front of me, I get really excited and I have to figure it out. And so that's what that was for me. But at the same time, I think it's going to go in even different directions moving forward. I don't think it's going to stay the same. And so, yeah, am I tired of battling some of that? Yes. But it wasn't the reason, that I've decided to retire. It was, again, mostly to spend time, on me and family. But, yeah, the game and landscape has changed, and I think it's going to continue to change. And that's where the new, younger energy can dig into that. And I'll be excited to watch it from the sidelines.
Who is the first person you told after you had officially made the decision, in your own head and you knew you weren't going to reverse it? Who's the very first person you informed?
Probably my sister. We're close, and I wanted her to know. My mom was always a big, Utah volleyball fan and came out all the time. And my sister comes out and flies in, and I have a lot of family members. So, I think she was the first person that I really needed to probably say it out loud to. And of course, her response was, you know what? It's good for you. You deserve it. And let's move forward here. So everybody's been so supportive of me and excited for me. I have a tremendous amount of great friends in Salt Lake. And, I'm not planning on leaving. This is going to be my home base. This is my home. I still hope to be involved with some fundraising. I've talked to the administration about, staying involved with some fundraising. We've done some good things with the Utah volleyball program as of late. And then, of course, I'll get involved with the alumni and connecting the alumni, with the current program, and have talked with Alyssa about that. So, yeah, it's going to be a big change, but I hope to, stay around and stay involved at a small bit, and we'll see what happens.
I know that there are not as many opportunities in volleyball as there are in things like basketball and football, but Coach, you're so gracious and easy to talk to. Has media ever been on your radar as something that, you could do as a semi-professional hobby with volleyball?
I've actually been asked a few times as of late. They just got Elaine Elliott back into the analyst position for Utah women's basketball games on ESPN Plus, but she's been out for about 15 years. So, I don't know. I'm not going to say, never say never to anything. yeah, I think I'm open to anything and everything. And, there's a lot, when you talk about opportunities, there's now 2 professional volleyball teams in the United States that, I think there's all kinds of opportunities in all kinds of ways to stay involved in sport and the game of volleyball. So we'll see. For right now, a whole lot of nothing.
Well, you are always welcome back on this show whenever you feel like you want to talk a little volleyball, because what very little I know about it, I probably learned by asking you questions. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you giving us time, not only today, but every time you've come on the show with us. So let's stay in touch, Coach.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Sean, and you asked great questions. I told you that before, and love to stay involved, and maybe you can get Alyssa Dorico on next. Be great for the listeners to hear from the new head volleyball coach of Utah Volleyball.
Yes, we'll be bothering her sooner than later, I'm sure. Definitely.
Good. It's just time for her to get bothered. So she's it's a whole new world now for her, but like I said, she's more than ready. But thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Congrats on a great career, Coach. Thanks for everything you've done for Utah Volleyball and the university, and enjoy retirement.
Thank you, Sean.
That is Beth Lanier, recently announced her retirement from the head coaching position at Utah Volleyball. And I wanted to ask her that question about, being an old school coach having to adjust to, because I think it's unfair to assume that, like Nick Saban doesn't want to deal with this stuff anymore, and that's why he retired. That's a narrative around Nick Saban. Now, even as we say that, there's a bunch of people that are like, well, I could see him coaching again. And there is some of that for people with this Kyle Whittingham thing, that there are folks who are just like, yeah, I mean, he has done a really, really good job of making his thoughts known without being a complainer about the changes in college football, the changes in funding, the NIL stuff, the transfer portal stuff. He doesn't mince words and pretend like, oh, I'm totally on board with all this. But he also doesn't just come off as someone who's whining. That's one thing that there's a lot of coaches in his sort of age bracket that they didn't master that. Guys like Dabo would just like come out here and just be like, I think this sucks. I think it's stupid. Kyle Whittingham has a little bit more of a nuanced approach. He's a really good communicator that way, and I don't know that we always give him credit for that. But I think I want every single coach that's over the age of 50, if they're retiring or they're moving on or they're doing something else, to be asked how much the current state of things in college athletics has to do with their decision. Do you feel chased out, forced out, exhausted out because this sucks now? Because the whole system is poisoned and weird and strange. Some of them are going to say, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I think most of them are going to do what we just heard Beth Lanier do and say, yeah, does it bother me, some of it? Yes, but that's not why I'm leaving. That's not why I'm retiring. And whenever we get a chance to have that conversation with Kyle Whittingham, I'll ask him the same thing. How much does this decision have to do with the idea that, I mean, you've told us for 6 years, however long it is now, I don't like having to re-recruit my players every 6 months. There's not a coach under the sun who likes that side of it. Now, most of them love the fact that they can fill whatever holes exist on their roster with somebody else's recruits that they get to steal. So, I mean, there's two sides to the coin, right? Nobody loves losing people to the transfer portal. Everyone loves adding great talent from the transfer portal. And Utah's done a great job of that. So, big thanks to Beth Lanier. I'm glad to hear from her, from the actual person retiring, that it's not just because I feel like sports are ruined. That would suck to hear that you lose good coaches in whatever sport because, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. The decision makers have ruined this for me. I don't want to hear that, and I'm glad we didn't from Beth Lanier. So, big thanks to her for joining us. All right, we've got a maybe guest coming on. Still don't know if he's going to be able to jump on. I know that's great radio, but that's just the way things are. It's someone you'd like to hear from if you're a Utah football fan, if he's able to fit it into his schedule. If not, we got a daily dump. So we're covered either way. Sean O'Connell Show on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 792.1 FM. Proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network. We're teaming up with the Rocky Mountain Chevy dealers and the Road Home to help out families in need this holiday season. Blankets, coats, shoes, hats, gloves. You can donate whatever you've got, brand new or gently used in good condition. Take them to your local Rocky Mountain Chevy dealer. ESPN700sports.com has the list of dealer locations. Spread the warmth, help others find their way home. The Road Home does a great job. We'd like for you to help out if you can. All right, during topical trivia, we are going to have some Big Willie's gift cards to give away, or a Big Willie's gift card to give away. 877-353-0700 will be the question and answer there. Zane Beatles is going to jump on with us here in just a second. The former Ute and obviously a guy who had a great career at the University of Utah, was part of those early days for Kyle Whittingham, which were, to me, those are some of the important, I mean, not only because of the Sugar Bowl and that being the high water mark, but that's where somebody like Kyle Whittingham, who goes on to have this legendary 21-year career, really cements himself. Starts it out with players like Zane Beatles, the former Ute and longtime NFL veteran, kind enough to jump on the Sean O'Connell Show today. Zane, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Appreciate you being willing to give us some time and some perspective today.
Absolutely.
The Kyle Whittingham news that he's no longer going to be the head coach at the University of Utah. For a guy like you who's kind of part of the start for Kyle Whittingham's career to now see it coming to an end, what were your thoughts?
Very happy for him. I know he's got grandkids and family that's very important to him, and I'm sure he's looking forward to, spending time with those people. Sad to see him go. He's been there for so long, been a staple and a true legend, in the state and particularly for the University of Utah. Great memories for me. Fun fact, actually, you mentioned, I was there from the start. I confirmed this with Coach Witt this summer, but I was actually his first commitment when he took over as the head coach.
Oh, wow.
Before the Fiesta Bowl in December of 2024. So, I'm honored. He's an incredible guy, an incredible coach. Happy for him, sad to see him go, all the things that I'm sure, most people are experiencing.
So because you were his very first signed recruit coming out of Hillcrest High School, you saw the formative years. You saw the growth of him taking over as the head coach. And that's something Morgan Scalley is going to have to embark on here, and we can get to that in a second. But you went from, this is kind of like a new thing for Kyle Whittingham to all the way through that Sugar Bowl year where he was established as the best coach in America, at least for that year. And how much change did you see in the way he did things in that process in your career?
I don't think there were drastic changes. I look back at my first fall training camp in 2005, which, coming out of high school, it's a whole nother level of things. So there's huge changes anyway associated with that. But that camp, man, was a grind, physical and just a lot of things. And I think you saw that evolve a little bit, particularly in later years. Now the game itself has just, really evolved as far as those kinds of things goes. But, I think he was, obviously a longtime coach and had some great mentors before him, Ron McBride, his father, Urban Meyer, and I think you could tell that he took things from each of those coaches, but then, made it his own. And I think, one of my biggest things about Coach Witt is just his consistency in his messaging, consistency in how he approaches, day by day. But then the willingness to look at those things that he does and implements and evaluate and make adjustments here or there to, incrementally try to make things better. And I think that's, that definitely happened. You could see small tweaks here or there, but all in all, who he is and how he approached his craft and how he led the team, the broad strokes of things were always there from the beginning.
You ended up as a first-team All-American. You had a great NFL career. So one of the great success stories in talent evaluation and then development. And obviously, that ultimate success is proof in the pudding with what you go on to do. And I know you're still successful in your career after football. How much of that do you think, would have happened without a person like Kyle Whittingham? You're a giant dude with a lot of athleticism and a great brain on you. You could have gone somewhere else and had a lot of success, but how much do you think, Coach Witt specifically shaped you into being, a guy who is able to achieve what you did?
So much of it. Honestly, I've thought about that even when I got into the NFL and, was going through that career and now, career post NFL. I firmly believe that if I would have gone anywhere else besides the University of Utah, I would not have developed into the player that I did. And, who knows what that means for a career in professional football. And, there's other factors there, but the program's led by Coach Witt. And, his approach and his way, just was really good for me and my personality and, my development at that time of my life. And I shot Coach Witt a text here over the weekend, just thanking him not only, for his leadership and what he did to develop me as a player and what that meant for my playing career, but especially for me as a man, now in my second career, now with a family, kids, all those things. He personally played an instrumental role in my development as a man, and I'm truly thankful for him for that.
Former Utah offensive lineman Zane Beadles is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking about Kyle Whittingham and the retirement, or I should say the stepping down announcement, because retirement is nowhere in his announcement or the university's announcement or his agent's announcement. And look, I don't know how to process that, Zane. There are national reporters saying it's not exactly a retirement. He might be open to other coaching opportunities. I see Kyle Whittingham, and I've been predicting all year this was his final year. But I also look at him and I say, well, what's that guy going to do if he's not coaching football? It's not like he's into TV shows, He's like, what's he going to do? So do you think we will see like a true separation from football for Kyle Whittingham, or is he going to be somewhere on a sideline before we know it?
I think guys like him, they're never fully stepped away from that, right? It is part of them. It's it's been their whole lives, and to be that successful at that level for as long as he has, you have to have a true passion and truly love the game. So I tend to agree with you. I think he'll be around the game in some capacity, in some form. Who knows what that means? Is that at the college level? Is that at the professional level? Maybe, maybe not. Is that at the youth level with grandkids and things like that? Maybe so. But, he'll always be around the game. And a guy like him and his leadership, he can't help but affect people, particularly in that space. So, we'll see. In the text messages I sent him, I said just like, hey, whatever the next chapter is for you, I hope it's everything that you hope it to be, and I'm sure that'll be a journey for him too to kind of figure that piece out.
So when we're talking about other programs that don't have the same guy in charge for 21 years, it's kind of a like abstract concept to say, oh, you helped lay the foundation for something. You were great, and so teams after you had that to build upon. It's a lot more concrete when someone like Kyle Whittingham provides the consistency that we've been talking about. So you had an All-America career. You and your teams helped to lay the foundation for what eventually became, Power Conference champion football. And now this offseason, or I guess we're not fully into an offseason yet, but the end of this season, for the first time ever, the University of Utah, that has developed a reputation as a great offensive line school in your years and since, has an Outland Trophy winner. Best interior lineman, best down lineman in the country is Spencer Fano from the University of Utah. A massive, massive accomplishment for him as an individual, but also from a program perspective. As someone who played the position, what's that like for you to see somebody at your alma mater now being decorated as the best in the entire land?
absolutely awesome to see. I don't know him personally, but just watching him play and reading and hearing the things about him and the type of person he is. Saw the video with his family and his brother, letting him know that he won that award last week is just so cool. I love the university, and you mentioned the consistency, and Coach Witt's been there for 21 years. Like, there are very few places in this country where that is, and for an alumnus like myself, being able to go back and see Coach Witt, but also many of the strength coaches are the same, the equipment guy is the same, many of the administrators are the same. Some of the coaches, like, I know those guys. I played, next to or under or whatever, I've known those guys for a long, long time, and it's really special and good to be a part of. And that flows into today's player, right? And there's definitely a proud tradition on the offensive line, and to see those guys carry it on and at the highest level as the Outland Trophy winner is spectacular.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but Morgan Scally was still a GA when you left the University of Utah?
He, I believe he had taken over as safeties coach by the time I left.
All right.
And I can't remember exactly the years, but yeah, I think I was there with him 3 years for sure. I think 2007 may have been the year that he came on the staff as a GA, and then quickly worked his way up from there.
So now he's the head coach. Can you envision that version of Morgan Scally being the head coach in 2026?
Absolutely, I can. I'm super excited for him. I'm super excited for the program. Speaking to the consistency, to me, that's one of the big reasons why I think that the program has had the success that it has for so long. You look at teams, in college or in the NFL, that are able to have that consistency. You look at New England in the Brady Belichick era. You look at, the years that Sean Payton was in New Orleans, Mike Tomlin, the coaches that have been in a place, Harbaugh in Baltimore, there is something to that. And to have somebody in Morgan that's been there and been a part of that and is, ingrained in that culture and came up in that culture, but also is going to have his new spin and his new take on things. And I'm sure, inject, some new stuff into the program, which I'm sure will be, exciting and welcome. I'm very excited to see it, both from continuing that consistency and, the next chapter and what that means.
Will we see you on the sidelines at a Utah game anytime soon? I mean, people might not recognize you because I don't know if people are aware of this. It's a very I ran into you at the airport. It is a lean, mean Zane Beadles these days. But
it's up and down. It depends on the week. But yes, not quite the size that I used to be.
Well, I hope we do get to see you sometime soon. Can't tell you how much I appreciate your time today and your perspective. Thank you, Zane.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and go Utes.
That is Zane Beadles, the former Utah football All-American, one-time anchor of an offensive line that did some really good things in helping Utah to its best season ever. And he's a local guy. Hillcrest, he might be, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, 877-353-0700. Zane might be the last elite recruit that Hillcrest produced. And I'm not saying that to be insulting. I think that now with the new rules and the new culture in high school football, I think a lot of people end up, moving from a place like Hillcrest to like a Bingham High or whatever. And by the way, Hillcrest, in my time, back in my day, they were producing some big-time guys. I ran into Josh Savage on the sideline earlier this year. Corey Dodds was a great Hillcrest Husky. Zane Beadles obviously had an incredible career at the University of Utah. And I did run into him at the airport, and we probably weighed the same. And he's much more impressive with it, obviously. But he's one of those NFL offensive linemen that after the career was over, he's trimmed down pretty markedly.
You didn't mean to be insulting, but you were anyway. So all the great Hillcrest Huskies out there.
Yeah. I mean, look.
It's like your now infamous tweet from Friday. I don't want to spoil the
I don't
moment,
wanna
and then
spoil
all
the
the
moment.
comments you did.
You did spoil the moment. I said that. I don't want to spoil the moment, but if I'm Michigan, I'm calling Kyle Whittingham right away, and all the Ute fans are like, well, you just spoiled it. All right. You know what spoiled it, guys? And you don't want to admit? You know what spoiled the moment? Is the fact that nobody said retirement. That's what spoiled it. We all had in our mind this, like, perfect storybook, like he's going to coach this bowl game and ride off into the sunset, and the only thing he's going to do is play with his grandkids and show up and wave at people at Rice-Eccles Stadium from here on out. That might be your plan and my plan for Kyle Whittingham. It doesn't mean it's his plan for Kyle Whittingham.
I just think, real quick, it goes to show, and I don't mean to say this to say to even suggest that there might be any hurt feelings or any kind of bad feelings between Whit and the administration at University of Utah, but it does go to show endings are always a little bit hard and messy. Like,
yeah.
And maybe in this case, it's probably not near as messy as other people who have stepped down. Certainly not near as messy as other coaches who have stepped down from places that they've been at for a long time and not retired. But it's still it's not as clean as we all would like it to be, or we all would like to think it would be. And that seems to be maybe some of the case here, in that Whit is like, he clearly, reportedly wants to coach again, but he and the administration don't feel like that coaching at the University of Utah is in the cards anymore.
And look, I'm sure we'll get some more detail on that as the days and weeks progress. Maybe by the bowl game we know something. Maybe after the bowl game we find something out. Right now, I will say this. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If this was another 5-7 year, I would be sitting down and saying, like, all right, it might be time. Utah was 10-2 this year. I could find you, and I will cut the clips. There are 6 plays this season that if they go differently, Utah is in the college football playoff, maybe.
Well, and how about this, OC? How about Alabama getting 3 more points against Oklahoma, and Auburn getting another touchdown, or Alabama being unsuccessful on a 4th and 2 on a game-winning touchdown in Iron Bowl? It might have been that razor close.
Well, that just would help BYU. But.
Yeah, BYU. I mean, maybe BYU gets in ahead of Utah in that case, but like Utah was right there with those 2 games, but even with the 2 losses.
I mean, look, you can pull it up right now. Utah's the 15th ranked team in the country. It says 10-2 next to their name. That's not this guy forgot how to coach. There's nothing there that tells you better move on from Kyle Whittingham. So when we hear like these things that some of us are hearing about, like, well, he might have been kind of chased. What? That's why I'm like, I'm not willing to jump on that bandwagon, because it's nonsensical to push somebody like that out of the job. Like you said, it's sometimes a little bit more complicated and a little bit messy. Here's what I think is the most likely scenario, is that Kyle Whittingham the whole way through was planning to retire. And when the decision came down, 2 Fridays ago was the deadline he was given, when it was like time to make that decision, maybe he wasn't as gung-ho about it as he thought he would be. Maybe he's starting to hesitate, and maybe the administration had something to say about that. Maybe. I don't know. But
yeah, I'm with you. I do not think it was any kind of aggressive, hey, I know you may still want to coach, but we've moved on to Morgan situation from the administrative side, but it doesn't seem to be as clean as we all thought it would be.
And I want to say this. I'm glad that we gave Zane the space to do it. Like, Zane Beadles, who is one of the best players to come through this program in the Kyle Whittingham era and ever, he said, look, my career would have been different if it wasn't for Kyle specifically. And that's the kind of thing that we should be focused on now that his tenure at the University of Utah is over. Also, I want to make sure I don't gloss this over. The same day that he announced, or they made the announcement he was retiring, he was there to do the Red Rocks showcase as a guest judge. That's like the easiest thing in the world, to just be like, hey, kind of a big day. I don't want people bugging me. I'm not going to show up for this. And what did he do? he showed up and did what he had committed to doing.
Well, and then OC, I was at the Mammoth game.
He was front row.
Yeah, right after the Red Rocks preview was over, or maybe he left a little bit early from that to make it to the hockey game before it was over. He was front row at the Mammoth game.
He has gone to a lot of Mammoth games. He said I've asked him about that. He's like, oh, I've been to a bunch.
And you saw the video? I'm sure he had the longer than he probably thought he would need to kind of waves, and I'm gonna sit down. It seems like I've done the gesture. Oh, let me get back up and wave again. It was incredible.
It's actually you give way too much power to the cameraman in those moments.
Absolutely,
because they just like cameras on him. It's not the cameraman. It's the in-stadium director who decides. Yeah. Just be
the camera stays on him no matter what.
Leave it there. Let's live in this moment. And, God would have just like, okay, take me off the Jumbotron.
Did a couple waves. He did a few thumbs up and a few sit down and stand back up. It was amazing.
All right. Well, I'm glad he's getting his flowers. He deserves them. One last segment, and we'll give away some Big Willie's, a gift card to Big Willie's if you know the answer to our trivia question, which is coming in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Big Willie's at 1717 South Main has an incredible food menu. The hot lunch today was the pesto grilled chicken sandwich on focaccia. Excellent sandwich. I highly recommend it. In fact, you can use your Big Willie's gift card that we're about to give away and purchase one of those. 877-353-0700. Kyle Whittingham has retired. We think? Question mark. He's no longer going to be the head coach at the University of Utah. We know that. That means one man stands alone as the longest tenured coach in college football. That is, of course, Kirk Ferentz from Iowa. Now that Gundy and Whittingham are out, who is the second longest tenured head coach in all of college football? 877-353-0700 if you know the answer to that question. Spence Checketts and The Drive are next. Spence is actually right here, if you can believe it, in our Broadway studios. Hi.
It is great to see you. Welcome back from France. How was the baklava?
That's a Greek thing. They don't.
Well, just because it's Greek doesn't mean they don't sell it in France.
Do you like pork rinds?
I love pork rinds.
These here are duck rinds.
Nice.
I'm going to give you some.
Straight from Lyon?
Yeah, straight from Lyon. It's apparently like a big part of Lyon cuisine.
Looks wonderful.
They're delicious.
But they sell baklava in Salt Lake. Why wouldn't they sell it in France?
They sell it there, but it's just, anyway.
I'm just convinced that wherever you go, you crush baklava shakes.
It's if they were available everywhere, I would, but it's pretty uncommon to have on a menu.
What was the best thing you ate while you were in France?
Ooh, I had some beef Wellington at this fancy place.
Lovely.
And was with foie gras on the side.
Nice.
It was excellent.
You got to be careful. That's rich. That's a rich, you know,
it was just like a tiny little hockey puck of it that was just enough to. Yeah, it was great.
Fair enough. I asked you before we went on air, since thank you for joining us on Friday, which
thanks for having me.
Was chaotic. We had a whole show planned. And then as the intro to the show was playing, boom, a report comes out, email spills in, Kyle's done. So we threw out the rundown, did the best we could. We talked 10 minutes of NBA, which pissed off 50% of our listeners.
How dare you?
I know. Calm down.
What are you doing?
We already have a 4-hour radio slot. I went back and looked. 3 hours and 43 minutes were about Witt stepping down. So you joined us to get your instant reaction. Now that we've got 72 hours between, are you more or less convinced that Kyle is going to just ride off into the sunset and retire?
I'm waiting to hear someone say, no, I'm retiring.
Yeah.
It's retirement.
Mm-hmm.
His agent is not saying retired. The university's not even saying retired. And Kyle Whittingham's saying I'm retired.
Yeah.
So until I hear retired, I can't believe that it's retired. And I want, again, I'm not wishing anything upon anything, people. I want it to be right because I've been telling you since July, he's going to retire after this year. This is it. He's going to retire. And I'm only like 30% right at this moment, and I don't like that. I want to be 100% right.
Well, you were right that he was going to step down as Utah's head coach. You were, I think, the first one I heard say it out loud into a microphone, so that's not nothing.
Well, it feels like nothing.
It's not, Sean. We love you broke the Alex Jensen news. You are the go-to for Utah athletics news breaking. Let's be clear about that.
Remember how I broke the Alex Jensen news and then everyone was like, hold on a minute.
You're not right.
You're not correct. You don't know what you're talking about. And then 2 days later, Pete Thamel does it. People are like, yep, it's definitely true.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's right, because Pete talks to people every day in the athletic department.
It's the ecosystem we exist in now where, like, this is a much less bigger deal. I got the Ricky Rubio trade for the Jazz first, and everyone's like, why would the Jazz trade for Ricky Rubio? And then 10 minutes later, Woj is like, Jazz trade for Ricky Rubio. It's like, oh, it's official. I'm like, I told you.
Yeah.
Listen to me first. But anyway, nothing that Witt would do in the second act or whatever you want to call it of his career would change what he means to this community, right? Like unless he went down and took like the defensive coordinator.
Don't say it.
Would he be Kalani's DC?
You're an idiot. Don't say stuff like that.
There's nothing he could do.
That's actually, you could say whatever you want because technically we're now in the Spence Checketts drive time
It's all
slot.
good, man. It's crosstalk. But I've been a little bit surprised because it's been the main question I've received from people all weekend. Not like, hey, how did this go down? Was he pushed out? Which I don't believe to be true. It's like, hey, what's he going to do next? That's what most people want to know about Kyle.
And the only person who will be able to answer that question is Kyle. And by the way, You got to give credit to how tight the ship has run up there.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was much to the detriment of the fan base when they were so tight-lipped about all the Cam Rising stuff, and you couldn't get a leak. You were trying. You couldn't get any kind of information, and everyone wanted to be the reporter, the person who broke the Kyle Whittingham is done at Utah News, and guess who broke it? Utah football did.
Yep. Well, there was one person who said that Cam Rising and Brant Keithy were not going to play all year and potentially cash in on some NIL promises and therefore not making the news public. I can't recall who that was me. But whatever. And people were mad at me.
We all want to be so right about these things.
People were sending me pictures of myself wearing a tinfoil hat the day that went down. We had some dopey reporter from the Tribune who's not here anymore call me out as a liar. But I was right. Not a big deal. Good job with Zane Beatles, by the way.
Good talking to him.
Yeah. We had Garrett Bowles on Friday was dynamite.
Garrett Bowles is awesome.
Yeah.
You want to talk about someone who has really made one hell of a life out of what was not anything close to a guaranteed start.
Yep.
Like, that guy overcame a lot as a young person that in his formative years was dealing with so many very, very difficult things. And now, I mean, he's nominated again for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award.
Yeah.
Like, what a monster.
Great story. And just he's turned into such a great interview. You know, the first couple of times I had him on, you had to kind of drag him along a little bit and stay in a certain lane. But he's doing a weekly hit with the Denver Broncos radio station now. And he gave me like 25 minutes of excellent content. So obviously that'll be the bulk of the show today. We're going to get as many Utah alums as we can just to talk about Whit and what's next.
Do you know who now the second longest tenured coach in college football is?
I elected not to Google it when you were asking the question. And the first few names that came to mind, honestly, Gundy, Whit, Ferentz is still there. Is it an obvious one?
No, not at all.
Okay, then I have no idea.
It's Troy Calhoun at the Air Force Academy.
Wow, okay.
2007.
Huh.
He was hired there.
So we're looking at 18 years. Yeah, I would not have landed on Calhoun. I was thinking of the obvious ones, but the big name schools these days are changing coaches every 3-4 years. So.
Yeah. Stay tuned for The Drive with Spence Checketts. Thanks for listening to the Sean O'Connell Show today. We'll do it again tomorrow on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM.